and have the sovereign will of the people undermined in the electoral process. Instead of asking that question, the handshake has given us BBI.
Yes.
Yes.
And I do feel like, given that the IBC would have been the central focus and the thing that was given the biggest priority, it seems to be the thing that has been pushed to the back.
So you're saying it should not have been a 9-point agenda, it should have been a 1-point agenda?
Or perhaps
Like just
have
sort
number
out
one
what
be
happened.
electoral
That's
justice.
number one.
And-
It is what is
No,
number one.
seriously. When you look at the rallies, it can be on paper, but then in reality, what changes have we seen? When you look at the IEBC and they're talking about not having the funds and they're talking about the same, having 3 commissioners and not being able to handle a possible referendum and another election when it comes. Clearly, it hasn't been prioritized in the ways that matter. We can be all about the talk, but in ways that matter, it hasn't.
I think Wajiro is asking that the first thing should have been admission that there was electoral fraud in 2017. That's still, the jury is still out there. Was there electoral fraud in 2017?
Of course there was electoral
Well,
fraud.
what do you want to look at?
We had a Supreme
Should
Court
we be throwing
decision.
allegedly-
We had a Supreme Court decision
Yes.
on electoral fraud. What other basis do you have?
If the BBI is supposed to bring about healing and cohesion and national unity, if you want to look at the steps towards healing, the first thing that you have to do is admit there was a problem in the first place. And if you're not pointing to what the problem is, you're glossing over the issue. You've not treated the wound, but you're putting a Band-Aid on top of it, whereby something might need stitches.
What was the problem in 2017 with the electoral management body? Because that's what the Supreme Court basically returned a verdict against the electoral management body. What was it? It was that there were, issues with the electoral management body in terms of managing that election. Now, do you want to call that fraud?
Well,
Was it perpetuated by a system? Was it perpetuated
What do you understand by
government?
mismanagement, really? Nice, polite word, yes.
Mismanagement is
Not
mismanagement.
managing it properly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have an election that has that
Fraudulent
causes about
is when it's completely deliberate.
fraudulent
and
is
meant
when now
to.
it's
Not.
deliberate, as you correctly put it, and there's an element of crime attached to it. And that has to be proven for it to be a crime. But
Yeah.
that there was something wrong, you didn't need to be a clairvoyant to know something was wrong with the electoral system.
Yeah.
We just needed a Supreme Court judgment to actually tell us, something. As people who are supposed to interpret the law, we agree.
With
something,
you.
Yes, something is actually
That's
very
not
wrong
right.
here. Yes.
And you need to go back.
If
Yeah.
And
something
do it
is
again.
wrong with the management of a process, that process is going to be flawed, Chief.
Yeah.
and then,
Yes.
It's
the way...
flawed.
Yes.
It's not fraudulent.
But
Oh.
no, the point is this. You have to start from the constitutional premise.
Yeah.
Because 2010, we, as a country, enacted the supreme law of the land. And it's expected that the state would be governed by the constitution. So what happened around the elections? One, there was violation around procurement within the IBC. How did that happen? There were allegations of political interference by the political parties. Now, some of these were not judged or ruled on by the courts because some of, based on the evidence
They
that
were
was
not brought
presented.
before the court anyway.
But there were allegations flying around there that both political parties interfered. There was a death, right? Death of a key IBC officer. And then there was dubious transmission of electronic results. So there was a litany of abuses, of violations of the constitution,
Yeah.
violations of the procedure that resulted in an uncredible election that brought the country actually to violence. Then there was a second election that had a whole host of questions. So, back to what you're saying. What should BBI have sought to do to ease the tensions? One is to, admit things went wrong.
Yeah.
And the 9 questions should have been around the IBC and the political
For sure,
actors.
yes.
And the political, because it's a political process. So what BBI does very astutely is it loaded many other issues so that there is no hierarchy.
To hide the
of
fact that there was,
Yes.
that the issue is
It's
completely political.
It's a lack of political accountability. Really, what happened, actually, I'd like to say that we are in a de facto dictatorship because we went to the polls and were not able to determine, not able to express our sovereign will through those polls.
Our vote didn't count.
It didn't count. So that is the question that BBI should be asking. But, it's a very clever strategy. If you want to distract people, keep them in the Stockholm cycle as we discussed, muddy it with issues, cloud it with so many issues that you won't get any reasonable response or accountability for that matter.
So the handshake should have been, well, the handshake was because of that political issue of the 2017.
We needed peace.
And it was important that we had the handshake.
Cessation of tension.
Of hostilities,
Yes.
right? And then beyond that, you feel that the political class has not done what it should have done, which is address what it did in 2017.
Of course it has.
Because the political players.
And
Actually,
why
not
should
what-
it?
Actually, not what
And
it
would you
now.
if you were them?
Not what it
And that's the
did.
question I wanted to ask.
It's what led to what we saw. You see, by the time you have the sort of crisis we had in 2017, it wasn't that one election. It was cumulative.
Yep.
The issues that had been around our elections for the longest time, just like there were issues in this country regarding ethnicity, regarding a host of things, and which had been supposedly dealt with a host of commissions.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, BBI is not even pretending to be an amalgam of those commissions and trying to resolve things that have been pointed out. There's hardly anything that the BBI is probably talking about that hasn't been spoken about before. But it's supposed to be the panacea. It's the one solution that's supposed to help us. It isn't, and it can't be. Because unless we address all those other issues, and that is the truth, TRC, all those,
Kriegler.
all those
Against the
have to be addressed. All those. And when we say all those, it may sound like a mountain to climb, but many of them address similar issues. They just
Yes.
probably talk about different aspects of it. Now, these have to be addressed. So it can't be that this new kid on the block is the one who is suddenly going to find a solution to all the issues that bedevil the country. The election was a symptom. It was a sign. It wasn't the problem.
Right.
So, in your opinion, then, BBI is a con?
Of course
No,
not.
handshake, not BBI.
No, it's not a con. Neither is the BBI. It's not a con. A con is something that is perpetrated with the intention of deceiving. That's a con. And the whole thing is an absolute deceit. I do not believe the BBI or the handshake are a deceit. I don't think so. It's just that it is not what some people claim it to be. It is not going to solve all our problems.
Was it intended to solve our problems?
Something changed. If you look at the handshake, at the point where the handshake, took place, of course, the country was on tenterhooks. The tensions were extremely high, and there were a host of demands that had been made by opposition leader Raila Odinga. So the handshake took place. If you look at events after that, that's where you begin to understand what went wrong with BBI. Number one, Raila Odinga did not pursue the demands that had been made prior to the handshake, because the handshake was to really agree as the key political leaders. There was a need for them to come together, shake hands, so that Kenyans can stop fighting each other. But Raila Odinga the opposition had already called to question the electoral results, the lack of, they had raised the issues around procurement, there was a host of other issues that they had put on the table that needed to be addressed, including composition of government. And if you recall, we were moving towards citizen assemblies. We were moving towards secession, because there were parts of this country that were saying, we will not, if our vote doesn't count, we will not stay in this country called Kenya. So the handshake was to say, look, we are a nation and we have some fundamental challenges, but we need to discuss them. So the handshake in itself was necessary. The unfortunate aspect is that Raila Odinga, for whichever political reasons, one, the opposition wasn't unified around the handshake, so the manner in which it took place broke
scattered the opposition.
Scattered the opposition. And, this is where you say process matters. So Raila needed to have consulted, agreed, we are shaking hands. What are the conditions? You don't go to a negotiating table without your demands. So Raila Odinga, for whatever reasons, and it appears it was very personal. And if you recall, and when I look at Raila Odinga, he's been in the opposition for a long time. He's been playing this political game. At that point, he had lost his son, I think 3 years preceding, his daughter was very unwell. Of course, if you've been in electoral politics around with a very intransigent government, you can imagine also financially there were issues around. So I think his whole this long into the opposition struggle, he made a calculation. And it's really unfortunate because Raila Odinga made that calculation when he was possibly nearest to securing, some leverage from the government. And his calculation was, I am going in, and I'm going in wholeheartedly, and I'm not putting the issues on the table. So the handshake in itself was okay. The problem was Raila sold out the opposition. And then this opposition again, the only interest of the opposition. And, we say that did the handshake kill the opposition? I put it to you, since 2013, there was no opposition. Because the opposition was was extremely impotent in parliament. They seem to have been overwhelmed by the tyranny of numbers. Because you must remember that the Jubilee administration came in with a majority in the House, and they were really reigning this tyranny of numbers, and the opposition really buckled under this. And there are some experts who will say that possibly the balance of power in parliament is one of the issues that needs to be looked at. But as an opposition strategy, the opposition was not felt in the House, so that there were, around budget issues, around procurement issues, around procurement of debt.
They were outnumbered.
They were outnumbered. Their members...
Outvoiced.
Not even outvoiced. Their members were collaborating and entering into the Jubilee position.
They were not outvoiced. During the one-party state where KANU held sway, you would find even MPs within that very party, because it was a one-party state, saying things that were completely contrary to government thinking and leaning, and they were saying it very loudly, and everyone heard.
Right. So I would say that the problem with the handshake is our lack of political leadership or inadequate. Our main political leaders are interested in acquiring power, but did not have clarity on why they're in the opposition, other than they're not in government, they're not in power. So they did not have a conviction, an ideological position that they were going to take forward. So no, Parliament did not perform well between 2013 to 2017, and then after the handshake, it's downhill from there.
Okay. We're taking a look at what's been covered in the papers this morning. Of course, the top headlines, all of them, all the papers are taking a look at what happened in 2018. That's the handshake, being the anniversary of the handshake. CT, before we go into this weather break, give us the proverb of the day.
Every lizard lies on their belly. We cannot tell which has a bellyache.
Say that again.
Every lizard lies on its belly. We cannot tell which has a bellyache.
Interesting. It's 18 minutes after 6 o'clock.
Cloudy conditions in Nairobi today at 17 degrees, expecting rain later with highs of 26 and lows of 17. In Nakuru, it's mostly cloudy and rain will follow with highs of 27. Mostly cloudy conditions in Nyeri this morning. Thunderstorms expected with highs of 25 and lows of 16. In Mombasa, 27 degrees. It's rain through the day with highs of 32 and lows of 26. Partly cloudy in Malindi at 28 degrees, looking at highs of 32 and lows of 27. In Kisumu at 21 degrees, it's mostly cloudy and showers expected later with highs of 28. Heading into East Africa in Dar es Salaam at 27 degrees. Thunderstorms expected with highs of 32 and lows of 25. In Kampala, it's a cloudy day at 21 degrees. Thunderstorms to follow later with highs of 26 and lows of 21. It's 14 degrees in Johannesburg and mostly cloudy conditions with highs of 25 and lows of 14. Taking a peek into Lagos at 28 degrees. Thunderstorms to follow later with highs of 36 and lows of 27. Up into Europe and Paris at 8 degrees, cloudy conditions, rain and sleet to follow later with highs of 15 and lows of 8. In London at 11 degrees, cloudy conditions, rain falling later with highs of 16 and lows of 9. And wrapping things up in New York at 16 degrees, it's clear skies and sunny conditions throughout the day, going as high as 21 and lows of 11.
You are tuned into Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room, and we are live on Morning Express with CT Mugandu Oko, Eric Latif, myself. I am Trix Ingado, and we have our special guest, Wanjiru Gikonyo from TISA. Welcome to the show if you're just joining us. But we're taking a look at what's making headlines, and today is the day that we are going crazy about the handshake. It's an anniversary, and therefore this is making huge headlines across board. So some are postulating that it is a con, some are saying it's a lie, some are saying it was relevant. As a reporter who was running around the streets of Nairobi consuming tear gas like I have never thought I would, and seeing people stoning one another, and the palpable tension that was happening in the streets, I feel like that this handshake was necessary just to calm people down. But as far as politically speaking, after that handshake, I'm not too sure that the things that we're doing right now are going to provide a solution. But at the moment, with business stalled, with nobody able to go into to town, and do their normal business, I feel like at the moment, seeing that handshake and Raila Odinga telling his people to just calm down, we're going to find a way forward, I think that was a good thing in the moment. Moving forward after that, not too sure.
What's the position of the opposition, ODM, and even the others right now?
The alleged opposition.
Yeah, because you see, what the Standard is basically saying is Raila is the foremost state apologist today. He speaks to the voice of a shareholder in a co-presidency. The handshake has made nonsense of the notion of political opposition. Is it true that we actually don't have any political opposition right now in terms of deeds and words?
We have opposition
in the political sphere.
We have opposition to the BBI. We have the teams, Tanga Tanga, Kieleweke. There's a sense of opposition, but they're all speaking from under the same roof. But as far as when you look at the real, the essence of an opposition, you're supposed to speak against, or rather, bring to account the actions of the government. Speak out when they're not doing the right thing, call them out when they're not doing the right thing. But as it is right now, I don't think the setup and the merging of what used to be the opposition and the government seems to bring a fertile ground for that sort of healthy, even if it's unhealthy, but just outspokenness against what the government is not doing right, or really pulling the attention of the public or other stakeholders to what is not being done that needs to be done. So as far as that concerned, I think the system, that platform that is there right now is not healthy for that kind of healthy political.
The opposition didn't shake hands. ODM did.
But that was the, perceived opposition, right?
Yes, it is. But you see,
so
the
you still have the
opposition
money.
Was a coalition. Remember?
So
you had
Wiper,
Kalonzo and his outfit, Mudavadi and his outfit.
All under NASA then.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
If you remember the noise that was made, the rumblings that we heard after the Raila Uhuru handshake specifically, because remember, even part of Jubilee didn't shake hands. This handshake was Raila Uhuru.
Yes.
The two.
Let's start there. Now, even the Kieleweke to Sieleweke fragmentation that we have within Jubilee arose after this handshake.
Yeah.
So it isn't as though the opposition, or what was traditionally known as the opposition as in NASA, shook hands. No. It's very clear. Uhuru and Raila shook hands.
Yes.
One supposedly represented the government, the other the opposition. But within government, there are people who felt represented by individuals whom we are told are aligned to the DP. didn't like that handshake. Still don't like it. They like the BBI less. They like the BBI rallies even less. Okay?
Yes.
And then on the other hand, the rumblings in the official opposition have gone down somewhat, because we see this movement towards, well, we can work together, sort of like
we support the government's agenda.
Choir beginning to form. But the opposition never really went anywhere.
Well, at the
Is
moment,
it as effective as it should be?
At what
As
point,
you'd have expected it to be?
remember, if we're talking about what happened in 2017, the beef was about that electoral process and the feeling that someone was shortchanged, meaning the results as was indicated and as it was seen to be wasn't so, and it wasn't declared so. The Supreme Court took a nice sanitized perspective, which ended up in cancelling the elections, yes. But if you were to be honest about our elections, let's start going to the basics of even party elections. The problems begin there. They are what Kenyans will call shambolic.
Yep.
of course.
But I think if
In a polite way of putting it.
if what
Yes.
Eric is hearing is, do we hear the voice of the opposition in the manner in which we heard it
Yes,
previously?
we do. We hear the
In the
voice of the
manner-
opposition supporting the government.
in the manner in which
Yes.
we heard it before the handshake, in terms of agitating for any kind of change or pointing in a different direction from where they were going.
Like a unified opposition voice.
And the answer to that
we
would be
call out
no.
this.
That you don't hear it as loudly, as forcefully as it was before, even from Raila Odinga himself. And you can see that before the handshake, he was
Then it begs the question. So, in the absence of Raila Odinga, are you in essence saying there's no opposition?
because it's
Which means that then
Raila
you-
Odinga is synonymous
would-
to opposition.
I want to re-emphasize. My view is that the opposition coalition, opposition parties were not effective prior to the elections, and in fact, the opposition voice or rhetoric came to the fore as we move towards the 2017 elections, but they were not effective in parliament because of the tyranny of numbers and because of
There's that, and there's also
So if you look at the few times that the opposition came out and spoke on issues that matter to Kenyans prior, and even after, around the VAT bill, for instance, there was very heated argument, and there were, even prior to 2017, there were a few instances when they really came out strongly, but for the most part, they were very ineffective. So I'd like to link that also to the Kieleweke Tanga. You have the deputy president who has now come out to challenge the president and yet was elected on a common ticket. This is contrary to the spirit of the constitution, because what he should properly do is resign, because he is no longer aligned to the policies of the president. So what we are seeing is that political leaders are very indisciplined in this country and do not comply to the law, and we let them do that. And this is the process when, I was trying to unpack what is Stockholm Syndrome. Why are Kenyans wrapped up in all of this? It's because we have been socialized to accept violations of the law, and it happens day by day. So Tanga Kieleweke, that in itself is, a very unconstitutional situation, because what properly should have happened, DP should step down, bring his issues and enter into now an opposition, maybe without a seat in government. But he doesn't want to give up his seat in government because he needs to use that seat to campaign.
plus power is sweet.
Yeah, he wants
You're
to.
not going to give it. I mean,
Just like
you're not
that.
just going to
And
drop
then
it
what?
like that because
Some-
somebody has made the suggestion.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yeah. So, and then the last point is that if you look at 2007 and 2017, there are lots of similarities. You had rigged elections, you had botched elections with political interference that were driving results in favor of the incumbent. Had a political crisis, and the handshake was a political settlement. The problem is that BBI as a framework for resolving these political problems is inadequate, because the first thing you should have insisted is that there is a legitimacy question around the present administration. And when you have a legitimacy question, you're then saying you need to balance that power how do you negotiate with a government that is holding all the power?
Maybe that's what
violating
the handshake was all about.
Yeah.
It was just about accepting, well, legitimate or not, accepting that this is the government, let's move on.
Handshake,
because
handshake,
otherwise
we
then
agree.
we wouldn't have moved on.
Handshake,
But-
we agree. What we are saying, the problem is what happened after the handshake. It's
But-
the framework around the handshake
But
that's
even
the
if
problem.
a framework wasn't announced in any format that was made public, does it therefore mean that there was no framework?
No, there was a framework, the 9 questions. But the point is, those 9 questions, by the time they were generated and the manner in which they have then been executed, missed the point. Because the
How?
main point was
How?
political accountability.
That is your
for
agenda,
20
Wajid.
According to
That is
whom,
not-
though? According to
That
whom?
is not
the point.
the
According to
handshake's
whom?
agenda.
At this point, for them, when they shook hands, it was to stop the turmoil that was going on in the country at that time. That was the point for them. And then to say, upon this now, what can we build? Because it was there was conflicts every which way. So for them, the point would have been at that point, let's bring people together, and then from there we can build something. They needed people to stop warring. That's what they needed at that
this
point.
is where there's a difference between 2007 and 2017. In 2007, because we had similar, really, the scale was different.
Indeed.
Because the scale was much higher in 2007, but similar instance where the government has violated the law and has used security apparatus to kill people and and all of that. The framework then allowed stakeholders to input into the agenda, and that is why you had land reforms, electoral reforms, constitution reforms, truth and justice issues being tabled
In 2007.
in 2007.
Let's take a
Now,
short break and come back, and then we shall look at exactly what was happening in 2017 and that political deal between the two leaders, because it's just the two leaders who entered into a political deal. Uhuru has told us that they spent about 7 hours in that meeting. First hour was just looking at one another and sipping tea and wondering, how am I going to start this? Let's take a short break. It's 26 minutes to 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi, also broadcasting on KTN News. This is the Morning Express on KTN News. And of course, we are also online on www.spicefm.co.ke. Take a look at traffic, and then the conversation continues.
All right, taking a look at the roads, let's start with what's hottest. University of Nairobi students, of course, were rioting last night and well into this morning. So there's some, can we say, roadblocks still on the way. On the road, Uhuru Highway, then coming out of Westlands, in and outbound to the city centre. It was a no-go zone very early this morning. We'll look at what that looks like in a short while, but you want to approach with caution. Take a look at Thika Road this morning and coming through to Ngara. Heavy traffic from Safari Park all the way through. From Survey, however, to Mathaiga is clear, heading in that direction. Wayaki Way jam starts at the 87. Kabete, it's moving very slowly this morning. The Red Hill bypass is open and not so clogged. Mombasa Road from Cabanas, heavy traffic all the way down, not letting up any time soon, but let's see what it looks like in a short while. And in industrial area, 3 more days until that construction ends, but for now we're going to have to contend with what is Jogo Road getting into the city centre. The eastern and southern bypass is open for business this morning, so not so bad. We'll take a look at what's going on with Langata Road and Gong Road in a short bit, but for now it's what we expect for Tuesday morning. Shout at us on Spice FM KE on Twitter. Let us know what you see, and we'll see how we make it easy for people to keep it moving this morning.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice
You're
up
listening
yourself.
to Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. We are taking a look what's making headlines across board, and the BBI is, or rather, the handshake is something that is making headlines across board, and it is an anniversary, and therefore we cannot escape this topic. In the room is Siti Muga, Ndu Oko, and Jurugi Konyo, and Eric Latif. Myself, I'm Trix Ngado. If you're watching on KTN News, if you just woke up and you're joining us, welcome. And this is the conversation. I don't know if we have satiated our appetites on this handshake, or should we?
No,
should
let's
we move
move
on
on.
swiftly to another topic?
Yeah, minutes ago,
The
actually.
coronavirus is making headlines still. Do you want to talk about this? Because we are told there has been a report that has misinformed us on our beards spreading said virus, and that we should shave.
Who's our beards?
I'm trying to be,
The
men in our lives.
inclusive.
yes, inclusive. So on page 2, it told misinformation has spread in Africa of the coronavirus. As cases of the coronavirus increase around the world, there has been a flurry of misleading and or false information, new stories emerging as well. And they are sampling a paper that has said, it's in Nigeria, I think Nigerian Punch, that says, to be safe from corona, shave your beard, CDC warns. What do you think, guys?
Well, yes, there's a lot of misinformation, of course, on the coronavirus.
This is just because you don't
You're
want to shave your
preserving your
beard.
goatee.
This is just because you don't want to shave your beard.
Yeah. A lot of misinformation, like whether white beard is bad or black beard is better.
I was waiting for that.
You saw that coming, didn't you?
I saw it coming, and clearly it has arrived.
Landed squarely.
Well, if we are going to shave off beards, we might as well cut off our hands.
What? Isn't
Well,
that serious?
Your beard is akin to your hand.
Now,
Beards are
coming to
replaceable,
the
hands
realm
are
of,
not.
of the real news, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
You see, if you are talking about misleading, or what you call, what often falls under the category of myths and misconceptions, this isn't new. The truth is this: the coronavirus is real, and it's spreading faster than we can cope with. Italy has shut down, okay, completely. Not the northern part, shut down. And they're taking the same sort of measures that have been taken in China. Other countries of Europe will follow suit. This isn't prophesying. This is simply looking at what we know about the virus. And what seems clear to me is this: the virus doesn't have to emanate from China or be connected to China or Italy for it to exist.
Or a Chinese person.
No. There seems to be an ecosystem where this particular virus seems to exist in. And that explains why, for instance, you found it in California, suddenly it's in Oregon. These states are not next door to each other. Okay? And there is no tie to China or Italy. And you're going to find many more cases exhibiting the same. The original cases were the so-called patient zeros. It was easy to understand, where it may have emanated from. That no longer is the only way of understanding it. And the other reality is it spreads fast.
Yes.
The other reality is we don't have a vigorous effort to ensure that everyone is tested to determine whether they may test positive or not. So the last and final reality, with others to come in the future, is that there may be many people who are walking around with the virus, but because they don't exhibit signs of being unwell, no one knows.
No one knows.
Yes.
So how are you helping us with all of that?
Well,
that's totally putting us in a very uncomfortable position. It's not
Actually,
alarmist because it's true.
It's
But
not-
then
it's
the
not
question I think
alarmist.
is then what? Because I think as Kenyans, when we don't understand something or when a problem is too big, we prefer to ignore it altogether. And we go on living our lives as we always have. So that's what we're doing now. But even for me, I'm like, then what? What do we need to
I
do?
was actually addressing the government here because they are the ones who lead the country in the attitude we should adopt. They have been treating the coronavirus as though it's a political problem. Okay? You find some government functionary making a statement and telling you, throwing words at the problem. We have done this. We have beds. They're not-
cancelling
we have,
meetings.
we have trained some people. They're not giving you details of preparedness and how those details align itself to the requirements of WHO. They don't tell you.
It's interesting that you
Yes.
say that, because just yesterday, President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged unity of effort in his in the war on the coronavirus, and
So
we had
political sounding.
Right. We had the CS for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, say quite a number of things yesterday, including telling people how to make sure that they took care of their personal hygiene. But interestingly here is that President Kenyatta says sustained focus on healthcare is crucial in the fight against infectious diseases, this being one of them. He said there is need for all stakeholders to have a passion for health, even through the declarations that have been made here. Now, this was at the first Kenya Health Convention that was held in Nairobi yesterday. So yeah, I would say the same thing, because at the end of the day,
Wait, what problems do you have with what the president was saying in his speech? He's
Words.
addressing medical stakeholders, not on coronavirus, but on the general state of healthcare in the country.
Words.
and coronavirus took
And he
center
has
stage
said
because
this.
Words.
he said
And then-
he said improving healthcare in the country is one way that will solve some of the problems that we see
Eric,
with
those words
coronavirus
is a
here.
problem.
It doesn't make anybody feel
He-
any more comfortable, like with what Wanjiro said a few minutes ago.
What did you want him to
Do
say
you
in that
feel-
meeting? This
do you
is
feel-
Yes,
Do
we
you
as
feel
the
better
government
after
of
have
Kenya
done one, two,
have
three.
done this.
We have
this,
put
this,
1, 2, 3
and
things
our
in
plan
place.
is this,
President
and we're
does
going
not
to
say
do this.
that
And
the Ministry
citizens,
of
we are
Health, the
not.
Minister of Health has already said it. Remember, the president came out and said, "I'm forming a what did he call it?
Task
The
force
task,
committee?
not the task force, the big committee of government,
Task force, big committee.
led by
yes.
the CS for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, and they've been meeting and they've been issuing their updates on that. The president is addressing, this is a meeting of health care providers who are meeting to discuss healthcare in the country. It's not about coronavirus. So he's reading his speech.
Interestingly
talking about
enough, it did
healthcare.
take center stage.
And
It
of
did.
course-
It took
and-
center stage yesterday during
Yes,
this
and
meeting.
of course that's
Eric,
why he
in
was
the
mentioning.
fight
That's why the
against
president was
something like
saying.
coronavirus-
That's why the president was saying, just beyond just the coronavirus, in terms of infectious diseases, increasing our health. What did he say? Our primary health, increasing
You
our
know,
focus on that.
no,
This
it's
is what-
very
that's
it's
what
very
that's-
tiring.
Sounds
Yeah.
nice to hear,
I would
but
like
come
to
on.
hear
It
something
is,
else
and
from
I
you.
agree completely with Ndu. These are words, and we are used to words from the president, and it's really, really tiring, because that's what he says. The reality is very different. This government is underfunding healthcare. This government is not investing in primary healthcare, is not investing in healthcare at level 1, level 2, level 3, where most people seek services. So, my thinking, in fact, what I was asking City is, what should we do? I do not have that much confidence in government because
CS for Health
it
told
took
you
a
what you
court.
should do.
It
He
took
said you
a
should
court. It took a court
Be very,
ruling.
very- on
It took a
No, no.
court
Personal
ruling.
hygiene.
He
It
said
took a
we can
court-
achieve
it
this by
took-
keeping
It took a
ourselves
court
and
ruling
communities
to
clean.
make this
Washing
government stop allowing airplanes.
Flights from
Flights
China.
from-
To land.
And
from
even
China to
then,
land.
Yeah.
and
And
even then,
they've indicated that there may be others.
yeah, even then, remember with Kenya Airways, the assumption that Kenya Airways refused to go to China. No, the pilots refused to fly the
Yeah.
plane.
Fly. They said they're not
'cause
going.
They were game. They
so
wanted
yes.
So the level of dysfunction within this
See
government,
the kind of
where
misinformation that flies around.
the
on
level,
this coronavirus story.
the level
No,
of
they actually
dysfunction
declined
within
to
this
fly these
government
planes.
makes the statements of the president really totally
It's
lack
nonsensical.
credibility.
mis-
No,
misinformation
actually,
is a
it
real-
is
yeah.
nonsensical because you are the president of the country. You take the lead in everything. You have an opportunity to address the country on something that is considered serious. Should you not go into some details about what your government has done and what they're planning to do? Just some, not a whole litany, but say, this is what
Two
we've
even.
done. This is what we are going to do. When it comes to level 5 hospitals around the county, this is what.
Exactly.
Say it. Will it
Right.
take
Concrete.
It doesn't even take 2 minutes to say all that.
for sure. Yeah.
Has the government said all those things that you're asking?
No, the
The
president,
government
There's a
has.
the
reason
president
why he's
hasn't.
the leader. He's the president.
The president
government
hasn't.
The
Eric,
impact it would have
when the
coming
president
from
says
him would
it,
be
it's
quite
different.
Yeah.
Look at all the pussyfooting that was happening around coronavirus until 2 weeks ago when he stood up and said, "Look, we're not joking with this thing anymore."
It's him who said it.
He is the one who
He
said
has
it, and
to
that's why we
speak
saw
out.
some of the changes that
And
we
he
saw.
said
Not
those
even
things
some of the
that-
changes
those
we
things
saw.
that you're
Now
asking
people
about,
saying we are going
he
to
said it
do,
at that point.
we are going to do, we are going to do.
Right.
So
No,
that
Eric,
this
at that
presented,
point, we
this
didn't know very much
presented,
about the coronavirus.
this presented a wonderful opportunity to even bring some of these things to task and say, okay, we should have done this by now. Where is it?
Yeah.
Or even say, from my people that I appointed, this is what I see has been done. We have done 1, 2, 3. But then what were we presented with?
Visit even the facility
Keep ourselves
and show
clean
us that
as
is-
communities through washing of hands.
How nice. Why did they mention washing of feet while they were at it?
Come
Listen,
on, guys.
no, but this is
this is the number
really-
one thing to do with the coronavirus.
But this is this
Personal
moment right
hygiene.
now.
The World Health Organization itself has said this.
The presidency
It's-
is a serious office, and we have a serious problem in the country. The presidency takes lead number one, citizen
Yes.
number one in these matters. You cannot just throw basic words. Say, no,
But they were written.
this
for him,
isn't a
probably.
situation where the government is going to get away by making some bland statements about we have thought, we have decided, the beds are ready, they even have blankets. None of that story.
Listen, the examples that are being given here from Nigeria, and all, I don't even know why they're looking that far. Here in Kenya, I have spoken to a taxi driver who said that he believes that if you take a sip of konyagi, you will be good after getting coronavirus. He was dead serious. He believed that changa or whatever. I mean, these are small things that would actually affect the country in case there is an actual outbreak, because we need information. We need the president to seem like he's having a hands-on approach, like he cares, because when it comes from his mouth, when he says it, when he visits
when he
these
tells
areas,
people wash your hands,
he-
people are going to wash their hands.
For sure.
Than if Mutahi Kagwe told people wash your
For
hands.
sure.
We tell him to
Believe
wash his
me,
own.
there's a power to there's a power to what. But because there are
on the
people
information
believing
front,
funny
whether-
things.
I
yeah.
agree with you
There's-
that
Are
yeah.
they,
At-
are
at
they running
this-
a campaign?
at
Is
this point,
government
we should be
running
having a
awareness
campaign.
This
campaign?
would be fantastic
I
in terms
wouldn't
of
call it a
communication
campaign,
campaign.
actually.
Have you heard of
Yeah,
it?
because you know the minister
That's what
making
we
a
need,
statement.
information.
President, you
It
know,
doesn't get covered. We
Yes.
need direct
At
information.
the grassroots level, people with
Intensive dialogue. Well,
Speakers.
There's no messaging, even if it wasn't dialogue. Simple messaging.
Did you
Yeah.
receive
You know-
this
And of course,
message
what comes to the
from
mind-
the Ministry of Health? An SMS a couple
Yeah,
of days ago.
I did.
That
Yes, I
Kenya
got the
Ministry of Health
message.
will be sending information on coronavirus. That
I've
was
gotten
on Friday.
one
That was on
Right.
Friday. I've
So
gotten,
they're
I've not
gearing
gotten
up.
I
another
haven't
one.
received.
Just
Have
one.
you received any?
I've just received one. That one on Friday. I haven't received another
Have you
one.
received the information now itself?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so
They've
I
just
would,
primed it and said
that
I
they're
would put
sending.
it this way. I would put it this way. Number one, when we look at Kenya's health response to Ebola, when there was the Ebola scare, we were pretty effective in terms of containing it. Ebola, of course, is not as infectious, and the scrutiny at the airports, points of entry, was, you could say adequate. Of course, the issue with corona is that it's extremely infectious, and then our whole health system and our whole social system is set up in such a way that if God forbid, corona gets into the system, I'm not even sure what government can do. So yes, we should be having a very intense awareness campaign
Going on.
Right now, Kenyans are living life as normal. Point in case, we all shook hands. Okay, I didn't shake hands, but we mostly
We
all
shake
shook
hands.
hands coming in. No, but you're not supposed to do that. So the awareness would imply that we stop engaging in the manner we do and re-question. And it's not just government, I think it's
The
also
French
us.
kiss, they've just stopped kissing.
Yes,
Well,
it's
interestingly
very
enough,
important.
But they're still shaking hands.
in certain dioceses of the Catholic Church, I know that the Catholic Diocese of Lagos,
Yes.
whereby they used to, do the sign of the cross on the forehead. It's now air blessings,
Actually,
and you
the
can't
Vatican-
touch
the
people
Vatican
anymore.
direct-
The Pope
Have to do that.
gave his,
Have to
his
do
sermon
that.
the other day where some online feed he did not meet the people. If the Pope himself is staying
That's in
away from
Italy,
the
remember?
flock.
It's in Italy where we've got
And
7,000 plus
they're known
cases.
for their kissing when they greet, right?
We will
We
escalate
don't do
on a
well.
need basis.
You know-
when people
You know what
start
I'm
dying,
thinking
we
about
do
as-
not
as
do
we keep
well
discussing
with
these
self-management and disease. We
So
do not.
We don't
Our
shake
first
hands,
instinct
we
is
don't
denial.
kiss, so no sex.
Wait too.
When you're having sex with people you don't know, say to you, what kind of life is this you're living and bringing to us?
Avoid crowded areas, so
That's
don't
why
go
you've
to
been
work.
quiet all this time. You're just thinking
thinking
this
No
about
way.
it.
this, no this.
What is why? How are we going to
How?
survive?
It's like,
10 minutes,
life
10 minutes to
is
7
over.
o'clock. This is a situation on Kenya's biggest conversation. We're taking a look at the headlines. Spice FM and KTN News, KTN Morning Express. Good morning.
You're tuned in to Kenya's biggest conversation. This is the Situation Room. I am Trix Ingado. I am joining the folks on Spice FM, CT Mugandu, Oko, Wanjiro Gikonyo, and Eric Latif. Today, we're taking a look at what's making headlines. And there's so much that we have focused on: the handshake, the coronavirus, understandably the very biggest stories being covered across board on the papers. But there's one that has, had tongues wagging in the country for the past few days, and that has to do with that alleged arms deal that fell through at the DP's office. On page 4 of the Daily Nation, we're told DP Ruto office staff set to be quizzed in Kenei murder probe. Of interest to detectives one staff member whom Kenei called to ask for help with recording a statement. And aside from that, there's I think the Standard is asking why investigations have not included the phone records of this individual, because as far as they know, deleting or formatting a phone does not, erase everything, because it's uploaded into the cloud today in this day and age.
Consider for a single second, you see, there is, you may have evidence that is sufficient to get someone charged, but is it sufficient to convict? See, now, if you were, say, investigating it, would you let the public know about everything that you have? The answer is no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You'd simply say certain things, but other things you'd keep under wraps. You've heard of situations. Remember the time in this country when there was this drug haul that beat all proportions. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine then who understands these matters, and said the police had been following that for a long. They knew who the players were. They're just watching. When they pounced, they had all the information they needed. There were no ifs and buts, and there was no escaping. Now, when other greater powers within the system took over and things may not have gone the way they did, it isn't that they didn't know. It isn't that they didn't have the evidence. They did. Right. Security forces, intelligence forces don't always tell you what they know. Now, clearly, if there was a telephone conversation, there's a record of it somewhere.
Yes.
And they know this. And they even know with whom the individual was talking. I don't know why Kenyans keep getting surprised whenever they say that, someone's telephone was tapped. They don't need to tap your phone.
They don't tap anymore.
They don't need to.
Yeah.
These gadgets that we have, there's a mechanism that ensures that all our conversations are recorded somewhere.
It's called biodata.
Yes, it's a question of whether they want to use it or not. People have been arrested, murderers have been caught simply by using telephone records. So it's telling us that
there's a lot of drama on this Kenei and the arms deal. I think it's just too much drama.
I don't think it's drama.
It's just too much.
But why do you say it's drama?
Is it not a dramatic
it's
story?
It's drama because look, somebody was murdered according to the DCI. The DCI is conducting that investigation.
Yes.
Then there was a supposed arms deal that was being executed somewhere between DOD, the ODP. Look, that's where the drama is.
Why do we have all the evidence to actually
point
to it being a drama or not?
And we don't even need it.
No.
The point is we actually don't need all this drama.
I actually need it personally. What you're calling drama is what I call fact-finding. There were people who went into the DP's office.
Fact-finding? You want to do the fact-finding?
Oh, no, it's being done on my behalf. Like the movies I watch, I don't produce them.
You don't have to produce.
I just watch them.
Just watch it.
Yes.
It unfolds for you.
I don't do anything. I just watch. Watch.
Wait for those guys to do their job. This thing on a daily basis, we're talking about, who did the Chesa, now again going.
Can I put in a different view?
Yes.
My perspective is one concern around the killing of a bodyguard associated with the DP. When you begin to see these things, you begin to think about political type assassinations. And, it takes you back to the 90s, 80s, 90s.
To the Uko murder case
when
and
these
so
things
forth.
are happening, because this is somebody very close to the DP, somebody's been killed, implying that it could be an inside. It just raises a lot of very uncomfortable questions. The other thing, of course, if you listen to what the DP is saying, he's talking about weaponization of the fight against graft and things like that being set up. Again, these are tactics from the 80s, 90s, right? Then you look at today's ruling by yesterday's ruling by Justice Odunga on Friday arrest or an abuse of power, taking us back to the dark days. The fact of the matter is we have a very progressive democratic constitution and we have a government that is dictatorial not in its intent, in its manner that is taking us back to those days. So all of this, I think, is, and no, I'm not going to answer the question about should the evidence and all of that. The larger question is that we have surely lost ground, and we are moving back. And I think we are de facto under a dictatorship. We've lost ground.
And not to take us back
in
to
enjoying our
matters,
democratic freedoms, in having, when you
using
begin to
the
see,
context of an alleged fraud between one Kenyan former CS and some two people who are foreigners. How are we losing ground in enjoying our democratic freedoms?
The point I'm making,
in an alleged fraud case.
When your democratic freedoms are being rolled back, you will not be asked, you will not be notified. You will see signs.
You may not even know it's happening until it's full front and center.
So what I'm saying is, Kenyans, we need to wake up and smell the coffee. When you begin seeing political type assassinations, when you begin hearing the kind of dialogue going around that alleged or apparent assassination, when you begin to see the way the state is exercising its power in arresting individuals to coerce them and hold them, without grounds, we are then moving back. We are then having our rights that are provided in the Constitution being systematically undermined by the state. And the point I'm making is we are in a de facto dictatorship.
Njiro, would you put this in the same category as the Musando death and what have you? Because then it would
a one sentence answer.
Turn out.
Yeah, well, Musando, I think was I wouldn't
similar.
I don't have enough evidence and facts, but yes, it is taking us back when you have apparent state-sponsored eliminations. Then what are you saying? What are you saying?
So we're coming to the end of the hour where our friend Trick Singado goes back and joins Michael Gitonga in the KTN newsroom. Before you head, let's hear the proverb of the day again. C.T. Muga.
The proverb is simply this: every lizard lies on their belly. We cannot tell which has a belly ache.
How does that help us?
Every lizard lies on its belly. We cannot tell which has a bellyache.
How does it help us?
Except
how does it
when
apply?
They're basking in the sun.
We have to wait to the end of
one
the
of the
show to
lizards.
see
Keep it here.
how it's
She has
going to
every
help.
right to ask, and I will look at her and say, wait.
At the end of the show. But
I will
it's always
tell
a
you.
pleasure
Can I give it
being
a stab?
So City will be explaining to us what the meaning of this proverb at the end of the show at about 9:59 a.m. this morning. So stick around. This is a Situation Room right here on Spice FM. Trix Ngaro is heading back to join Michael Gitonga on KTN News, KTN Morning Express. Trix, we'll see you again tomorrow.
See you again. This was fun.
Yes, it was. Keep it right here on Spice FM. We'll be having more conversations between now and, of course, 10 o'clock. This is a Situation Room broadcasting from Nairobi to Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. Also live streaming, as we always do on this show, www.spicefm.co.ke. We're also on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock.
Okay, still asking about the security situation right around Arboretum going towards State House Road this morning. Everybody wants to, I'm saying wants to because that's what you want to do, approach with caution because you don't know what's going on right now with those demonstrations at the University of Nairobi that started last night. So you want to be very, very careful approaching the area. Approach with caution, tafadhali, to keep safe. Coming off of Thika Road, we still have some traffic right around Garden City and then moving down towards the CBD. The northern and eastern bypasses are an option if you want to take the long route then to get into the CBD, but you might not then get caught up with traffic. So there is an option for you. On Mombasa Road from Cabana towards General Motors to Bellevue, moving very, very slowly, but it is moving. You're not in a gridlock this morning at least. Then on Gong Road, Naivasha, Kingara and Riara Road are serving it up this morning, folks. Trying to get off on Gong Road to use that as an alternative. It's moving very slowly, but that's one that you can use as you approach the City Mortuary roundabout. Getting off Langata Road, joining from the southern bypass, then getting heading to the T-Mall roundabout, not so bad right now. Baghdadi Way is open and A-OK. If we see any major problems, we'll let you know. But for now, this is what we see. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter. Give us a call so that we can make sure that at least you have the best option for this morning.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power.
It's also
and
Kenya's biggest conversation. And thank you very much for choosing
Agent Provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down.
In Nakuru,
This
in
is the
Eldoret, we broadcast
Situation
on 96.7, Nyeri 90.9 and 97.7 in Malindi. In the Situation Room this morning, we're also joined by our guest host, Wanjiru Gekonyo. She's the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Accountability. Now, Wanjiru, your organization is among those that have gone to court because of what happened 2 weeks ago. This is a signing of a deal between the president, the national government, and the county government of the city of Nairobi. What's your beef?
Now, where do I start, Eric? We went to court because the manner in which the transfer was done is unprocedural, illegal, unconstitutional. And those are the issues we placed before the court. And there's a hearing tomorrow. And we wait to see to get directions on that. And we're not the only ones. There are 3 petitions that have been filed on this. But the larger question for us is we are an institution that strongly supports devolution. And this is because we support the devolution of power. We believe that sustainable development is when development is for the people, by the people, including the people, is bottom up. And so we believe the way to redress inequality in this country, to distribute finances and resources equitably is through the devolution of power. We are aware that the national government, in this country, Kenya has a history of recentralization. The Independence Constitution was created devolved structures through the Majimbo government that was rolled back, 1970s. The problems of centrism, of centralized governance had already begun to exhibit. And then the Kenyatta regime came up with a scheme to support the establishment of the growth of rural towns into larger municipalities. That system died. In the 80s, there was a district focus for rural development. And the reason for this was because people were flooding into Nairobi city looking for jobs because all the money was in Nairobi city. And there was no growth happening in an organized and supported way around. But the district focus for rural development also collapsed because the Moi government then that instituted this couldn't let go. In fact, the district focus for rural development put the provincial administration at the center. So when devolution came about, it came about in a context where the center has continually refused to let go. And what is it letting go of?
How can you make sure that that messaging is actually effective and that you can measure success?
Ndu, I'm thinking I need to have a conversation with you because obviously yes, we are policy people. We understand the policy. We consult with lawyers. We understand the law part of it, and we understand the rights. And we're able to craft petitions and go to court. When it goes to citizen messaging, we have to step it down, and we're in the process of doing that. Now, normally what we'll do, and what we're doing in this instance, is we're in discussion with residents' associations, because we have been working with certain residents' associations, sensitizing them around the law, because Nairobi County has passed very progressive legislation on public participation, which it then doesn't enforce because of the lack of political leadership. And in fact, the conversation we've been having with ourselves as residents is, what can residents do to improve the political leadership of the county? Because until we do that, the constitution will not serve us. And that's about really organizing around the electoral process, to ensure that we get better outcomes and we're not subject to the tyranny of political parties that, are really giving us very poor. There's some good leaders at county assembly level, but then there are some that really don't deserve to be there. So we're working with residents' associations, and there's a number of networks that have also been working with informal settlements and various groups. So civil society we work on the ground, and we do have networks. What we haven't been able to do in Nairobi, and possibly what we should have tried to do, is to organize a county-wide kind of structure, but it's also very political, because at some point, particularly around the handshake, until things settled down, there was a very big sense, even amongst the citizens, that there were parts of the county that didn't want to engage in anything this government had to offer. So we're trying to do sensitization, come get involved in the budget process. They were like, we're not going to get involved there.
We don't know this government.
These are not our people. So the truth of the matter is, we haven't invested enough. Civil society in this country, unfortunately, is like 90% donor dependent. Donors have, look at Nairobi and say Nairobi residents are much better off than residents of Marsabit or Turkana.
How are they better off exactly?
In terms of access to services, in terms of access to services, just because they are the capital city. And so the emphasis of funding is in other counties, especially the marginalized counties, because there are counties that really don't know government. If the church, religious institutions hadn't been in some of those counties, there'd have been no services. And mortality rates are through the roof, education levels are really low. So you'll find some emphasis in informal settlements. You'll find emphasis in the marginalized counties. So devolution, in a very real sense, has not favored the big cities from a distribution of revenue. The division of revenue formula has actually meant that the big cities get less than they were getting before. But of course, big cities have potential to raise revenue, and because of failed political leadership, they haven't done that. So big cities, places like Kiambu, Nyeri, that previously had a lot of government expenditure, possibly have lost out under the devolved framework. But the mindset has to be, there's potential to raise revenue. There's also the trade-off. Devolution has given us stronger local assemblies, stronger citizen say. Actually, devolution is supposed to be rests on public participation, not even public participation, it's citizen engagement. Self-governance is the term that the Constitution uses.
Do you find that citizens are, when you get to the nitty-gritty of it, that citizens are really interested in the basics that they need, as opposed to the following of the leader of the day?
I'd say yes, they are. And if we had wider spread, more sustained programs, we would see that. But yes, they are. My personal experience is where we've worked with residents' associations, organized groups. Once they understand the framework, understand their roles, responsibilities, and the opportunities, they engage and they will demand. Now, where that kind of gets lost is if the government doesn't respond doesn't respond the first time, second time, third time, and we don't sustain the engagement, maybe escalate it, go to court, do the next action, then those residents may decide, okay, we engaged, it didn't work. And so, some apathy can set in.
Yep.
But we've also seen instances where we've done sensitization and groups organize themselves and begin to engage. There's one youth group in Embakasi. We're doing a solid waste program. We're doing sensitization around the budget, employment of youth in solid waste and all of that. And they were so moved by the issue, they organized themselves and actually started, they had been doing some kind of unstructured work around solid waste, and they got much more structured. And once you register yourself, you have legal status, you're then able to begin borrowing money, and they began problem solving. We also did another program around funds, because there's lots of funds made available, youth development funds. And another group in a different part of Nairobi also registered, and then were able to register themselves and actually register as a CBO and begin sensitizing. So knowledge is empowering. And the one thing I find is when citizens have knowledge and understand the opportunities, they themselves take the initiative. But the reality is the responsiveness of government or the non-responsiveness of government is a big problem. And so, pushing government to unlock. So I think citizens put in a lot more effort than the responsiveness
they receive.
That they receive. So we do have a problem. But I think, when you're in this situation, we have to recognize we are trying to democratize a system that is a closed system that is benefiting a few.
It requires us to push. Let's take a short break with Jiro, and then at 17 minutes past 7, take a look at the weather, and then we continue the conversation. Wanjiru Gikonyo is our guest host this morning. She's from the Institute for Social Accountability, and she's saying citizens deserve a say before any county functions are transferred from the county government to the national government. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz.
Showers are imminent in Nairobi today at 17 degrees, highs of 26 and lows of 12. And Nakuru will follow in fine form at 16 degrees currently, experiencing highs of 27 and lows of 26. In Nyeri, mostly cloudy conditions this morning, to follow with thunderstorms later and highs of 25. In Mombasa, thunderstorms expected later on with highs of 32 and lows of 26. In Malindi at 28 degrees, it will be showers in the afternoon with highs of 32. In Kisumu, mostly cloudy conditions at 18 degrees and rain expected later with highs of 26 and lows of 18. In Dar es Salaam at 27 degrees, thunderstorms expected later with highs of 32 and lows of 26. In East Africa, going to Kampala at 21 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions. Thunderstorms will follow later with highs of 26 and lows of 21. In Johannesburg, it's clear skies at 14 degrees, highs of 25. And wrapping things up in Lagos, partly cloudy conditions at 28 degrees. Rain expected later with highs of 34 and lows of 22.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's a
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Thank you very much for choosing Spice FM this morning. My name is Eric Latin. In the Situation Room, we have Indu Hall, CT Muga, and our guest
Mornings
this morning,
done right.
Executive Director of the Institute for Social Accountability. We're talking about a petition that has been filed, one of petitions that have been filed by civil society organizations and citizens concerning the decision to transfer some functions from the county government of Nairobi to the national government. And that's what we're actually looking at just before we went to the break. That's what we're discussing. I hear this petition, and to me it resonates. Because I feel that, when it comes to issues of transferring of functions or anything that goes into tinkering with the state of devolution, then the people need to be involved. The citizens need to be involved. The citizens need to make that decision themselves that, yes, our government, because of one reason or the other, you don't have the functions right now. Let's transfer this function to somebody else, but also determine for how long. What are we going to be doing in the interim? How shall these functions come back to us? And then how do we hold our government accountable at both levels?
Eric, would you consider the BBI rallies to be public participation?
The BBI rallies? No, they are rallies.
So where is the public participation in this entire BBI process?
The public participation is only, I think, when it goes to going to the task force, the steering committee.
Yes, and how much of public participation is it really?
We're in the steering committee?
Yes.
It's open to the public. Any member of the public is open to go and do it. Now, the thing is, of course, I would support a better organized participation, in which case we're saying that the steering committee is going around the counties and announcing that we're going to be holding a town hall and this is it. So, engage more with the people, not saying bring in memoranda. But of course, timelines and all would be the argument that is used here.
Oh, there's always time. If it's something that the government considers important, they will make time for it. Let me explain what I mean by why I'm asking. Let me explain why I'm asking the question.
Yes.
When you talk about public participation, by the time you get to the point where you are dealing with a rally or the so-called committee meeting, there ought to have been other meetings within that particular area where they have discussed. So when people come to this huge forum in the town hall, there is some understanding that people have arrived at, and even those views are representative. Because the truth is, not every view can be collated or collected on that day. It's just the truth.
True.
Now, do we see, sense, understand that such a process has actually taken place?
Where?
My question, City, is why are you linking BBI to the re-centralization of Nairobi?
No.
Or are you?
It's public participation that I am focusing on, which is the bedrock of this decision-making process.
Right, but you see...
And I'm saying that if we understand what I'm asking, then it is clear that public participation did not take place in this decision that was made between the county of Nairobi and the national government.
Yeah, but you see, the BBI is an inherently political process. We actually don't know. We are now beginning to see how it works. In essence, handshake, 9 questions are floated. A number of people are consulted. Some report is generated that really is very incoherent, doesn't make sense. And then those provisions begin getting implemented.
It would be perfect.
This is what's happening.
It would be perfect if they did not attempt to tell us that those town hall meetings are supposed to represent public participation.
But
this is what I'm getting at.
And I think you agree with Latif then when you say BBI is a political process. Those are political rallies.
And even if it's a political process, it has to align its processes to the Constitution. What I'm trying to say is that this thing should be understood for what it actually is, as opposed to what is being fobbed onto us that it is.
And in fact, when you say this thing should be understood, the transfer of functions should be understood for what it is. It's a re-centralization.
It's a power grab.
It's a power grab. In fact, that's the perfect word. Functions can be transferred. This is subject to court interpretation. The conditions for transfer, and I think Wanyama, Advocate Wanyama, spoke to this, where he was saying it's anticipated that it would be transferred on 2 grounds: subsidiarity or capacity. Subsidiarity being where national government may decide public schools, public primary schools are better run by the county because they are closer. They can set up PTAs more effectively. They can monitor and all of that.
Yep.
So subsidiarity is saying this service is better implemented at the lowest level. So let's transfer it. It can also be transferred on the basis of capacity. You go into a county and they don't have maybe the personnel, they don't have the infrastructure, and so that service is maybe transferred back. But there is a catch, because national government is also supposed to build capacity. So it can't... One
should be temporary. It should be temporary. Time bound.
One example, I remember one argument around vaccines, because vaccines had been procured centrally and then stored centrally because of the cost, economies of scale of how they are procured. So there was a very strong argument being made by some factions of the medical profession that vaccine procurement should not be decentralized to county level. It doesn't make economic sense. So those are the kind of questions that are supposed to happen. In the case of Nairobi, the problem we have is not that the county doesn't have capacity. It's that the county has been mismanaged by the
elected political leader.
Subsequent. I mean, Kidero did his bit, but of course, under Sonko, it's totally fallen apart because he doesn't even have the CEC. He doesn't have a cabinet. He doesn't make cabinet decisions. So that there is no political basis on which decisions are being made. So the option would have been they could have gotten into an agreement, because the Intergovernmental Relations Act allows national government and the county government to set up, to sign an agreement to manage functions. You don't have to transfer them. But, ironically, from 2013, 2014, there's been a Nairobi regeneration program running. And in the interest of disclosure, I sit on the Nairobi County Budget and Economic Forum, and so we've been quite involved with the county governance in the budget process. And there's been a regeneration program running, which has national government officers and county government officers sitting to implement county functions. Now, we raised concerns about regeneration because it was very opaque. And we asked, why doesn't this regeneration get, make it clear what
you're doing?
What is national government putting in financially? What is county putting in financially? And who is responsible? And then they'd keep saying, well, no, it's just an intergovernmental dialogue coordination framework, and the county officers continue to implement. So what they could have done is taken that regeneration program and made it, legislated it. This Gazette notice should have been on that. It's not a transfer, because they are proposing to transfer staff from county back to national. So that means the county has the capacity. They're lacking political leadership. So one, they could have done an agreement under the Intergovernmental Relations Act. They didn't have to transfer the functions. The second thing is the county revenues have been falling. And in fact, you noticed KRA has already been gazetted to begin collecting revenues. This was there was no public participation once that Gazette notice was published. The government has begun implementing.
When do the 14 days lapse?
Thank you.
Because they
haven't lapsed yet.
The deed of agreement says that everything comes into effect after 14 days. And within those 14 days, we're going to have, alerting the National Assembly, alerting the County Assembly, and public participation.
Public participation.
This is public
participation. You noticed yesterday.
It didn't envisage court cases.
I think yesterday, or it might have even been Friday, KRA put the notice that it's beginning to collect revenues from the county. So this means that this was not a process that was open for discussion. This was
But can I ask the question,
foregone.
When it comes to revenue, is it that the mechanism for collecting revenue is faulty, or is it that the revenue that is collected never gets to where it actually should?
With revenue, the latter is the case, and this is a political accountability question. Revenues in Nairobi, under Kidero, went up 2013, 14, 15, 16, and then started declining again. So when Kidero came in, and under pressure to perform and run things properly, the revenues were going up. And then at some point, I think political interests set in, and the emphasis on accountability went down, and the revenues began to fall. And then, of course, they collapsed around 2017, 2018 because of the dispute over the elections. And when they came up, they never went back up to the
same level.
To the same level. So it is very clear. And in fact, we did a memorandum to Sakaja, to the County Assembly, to the Controller of Budget around this question, because we said, where is the money going? Are you saying Kenyans have stopped paying their licensing fees? How can revenue fall? It was obvious that the money was being...
It was about accountability.
It was about accountability. So now the
I think
public
stolen
finance...
is the word you're looking for.
Stolen.
Right, okay.
Stolen. Yeah, thank you.
But the
Public
question I would
Finance
ask...
Management Act allows the CS, Treasury, to step in to a county where financial management is deemed. So, one, the national government could have intervened on that very thing. And actually, there's a mechanism where funds are stopped to that county until those issues are resolved.
I have heard you say a couple of times, could have, should have, but obviously these are things that did not happen. So then, could you point then that towards an absence of willingness to have this done? Because you said we could have had the conversation. It could have been a different way. We should have done it this way. But I mean, obviously, we're at a place where it's already been gazetted. KRA is already collecting funds.
It's not a fait accompli. We must fight back because it's totally illegal. Like I said, we are under de facto benevolent dictatorship. It's benevolent because we are not being coerced through intimidation in our daily lives. But it is a coup against the Constitution of Kenya, and it is a suspension of our rights.
Wanjiru, we are being coerced. In fact, we are being violated every single day. We've been plummeted so much so we don't
not
even...
just on matters Nairobi.
We don't even seem to understand when we're being violated. We at least seem to have gotten to a point where we think it's normal. And it isn't.
I say benevolent because...
the sun is rising. It's going to be a bright day.
It's not actually.
29 minutes to 8 o'clock. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's take a look at the traffic and then we come back and continue. Good morning.
All right, poor visibility on Langata Road from the weather this morning. The sun is actually not coming up, unfortunately. The fog is quite low. Mombasa Road and Langata Road, fog lights up are necessary at this point. And you want to be very careful because we don't want to have any accidents. Try and avoid that as much as possible. Langata Road, as we see, at a standstill right at the bypass. So if you're using the bypass trying to get into the city centre, might not be an option right now because you get to Langata Road and then you will be stuck. Thika Road jam from Muthaiga right up to around Kasarani going backwards, with a break at Surveys where we have a bit of traffic. Jogo Road all the way from Hamza all the way to Likoni Road roundabout. It's not moving. We know that there's construction taking place on those roads, some maintenance until the 13th. So that will affect traffic, as we had said before. Mombasa Road from Simba Cement towards Athi River is moving very well. But then right after that, going towards Cabanas, you have a hold up. Okay, so it looks like that. Prestige all the way from, Ngong all the way from Prestige all the way to town. No incidents or accidents right now. It is foggy though, so you want to be careful. Kiambu Road already at 6 lanes right now, and it'll take us a while before we get back to the normal 2. Spice FM KE, let us know what you see.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Eldoret, Nyeri.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The Executive Director of the Institute for Social Accountability. Stick around. In the next hour, we'll be talking to Dr. Ralph Heckner. He's the ambassador of the Switzerland to the Republic of Kenya. Of course, we'll be talking about devolution in the Swiss Confederation and any lessons that we could learn in Kenya. We're talking about devolution in this country and the actions that we saw between the county government of Nairobi and the national government, transfer of some 4 functions to the national government. Of course, some civil society organizations and citizens have gone to court challenging this. There are already conversations around this. Wanjiru Gekonyo is raising this morning as an issue for us to discuss. And I'm saying, all right, yes, so it makes a lot of sense when we say that citizens should be involved in making such major decisions. But also let's look back at citizens and citizen engagement, not even participation, but engagement. When you say that looking just casually at what has happened in Nairobi, it's an issue of governance and failure of governance, where were the citizens during all this time? Do we feel that the citizens engaged during this time? And I feel that citizens haven't engaged. And also because...
How can they engage, Eric?
Those are the questions. When we say that the devolution is about people governing themselves, people seem to forget that they have a role and a duty.
They do. When I say we've been violated, that's precisely what I mean. When you've been plummeted to the point where you think that being violated is normal, you really have a problem. What is the self-preservation mechanisms that Kenyans employ? Silence. and you assume it is compliance, and it isn't necessarily compliance. It's just that you feel this is the best way to self-preserve.
True.
Because anything to the contrary would put you in harm's way by simply bringing yourself to the fore.
True.
It's why people keep quiet.
But I think we are starting from the point of silence. I'm not saying a point where we started from a point of engagement and then we got plummeted and then we got silent.
Oh, by the way, I'm actually with you on this one here. I actually want to introduce my own agenda here. This is why I'm going the route I'm going.
Okay.
You see, whenever we talk of finances, the thing that isn't talked about is the reality of the actual possibility and probabilities of that particular amount. Do we know what the Nairobi county is actually able to generate in terms of revenues? We don't. So whenever somebody throws 14 billion at you, you say it's a huge amount. A huge amount compared to what? What is the
Against what
capacity?
capacity?
Yes. What is the capacity of the county? When you know that, then those amounts will make sense.
Coming from a point of engagement or silence, I think also leaders understand very well that Kenyans generally are not going to speak up. That Kenyans generally will take that information or the lack of information and really keep quiet and not do anything with it. And I think that they have used that to their advantage quite broadly, across. If you want to look at other countries where you see this kind of participation, it's because the leaders are very well aware that citizens will make noise, will not agree to this kind of thing.
But it begins from citizens engaging.
Right, but you see, if people are not inclined towards that engagement from the very beginning, that's where you also have a problem. And you will find that leaders will prey on this because they understand that the people will actually not raise arms or will not get up and protest.
To some extent, I will not blame the leaders for that. Because the system as it is, of course, the government as it is, it's going to ensure that it runs the way it's best running. The citizens should ensure that they engage so that the government runs the way.
It helps the agenda when they know that nobody's going to speak up.
This is where civil society comes in because they play the role of the citizen's voice. At least they stand up on behalf. They do stand up. And if you
awareness creation.
If you look at the venom with which the government tends to direct energies at civil society, it tells you civil society is effective. Something that isn't working or isn't a thorn in your flesh, you'd simply ignore. But it also tells you that those in power would rather the citizenry had no voice.
Absolutely.
I think and I agree, maybe what I'd wish to qualify is citizens do engage. Like I told you, we lobbied quite strongly with the County of Nairobi, had the County Budget Economic Forum set up. We were... I sit on that, but we also supported the forum. And through this forum, we were able to engage with various groups, professional groups and everybody around the budget process. And so we tracked very closely under the Kidero administration for the first 4 years. And what we found is, as soon as the budget process started, there was very wide engagement by citizens. Citizens really attended, especially in informal settlements where people rely on public services. They really attended.
But they were organized to attend.
No.
They didn't do this of their own volition.
No.
I think it's where CT is going.
They
were invited.
The county put out announcements and citizens showed up. There were town halls around the budget process. This is what happens.
But I think where CT is coming from is that in the initial point of it, people didn't rise up and say, didn't rise up and say, I want to be involved in this process. An invitation took place.
Allow me to finish, because the point I'm making is citizens responded to there are various forms of participation. You've got invited participation, you've got uninvited participation. Invited participation is where government invites you into its processes. And, public participation is not just to attend the meeting. There are various, you get involved in decision-making, you get involved in oversight, you get involved in co-implementation, because there are parts of this country where county where residents associations are implementing public services because they partnered with the county government. So there are various forms of participation, and there are structured invited spaces, whether they are committees like the County Budget Economic Forum, health committees, and their budget meetings. Now, the rationale behind the budget meetings is, one, citizens will show up, give their priorities. County government will document those priorities and will then aggregate those priorities so that as it implements its county integrated development plan and annual budgets, it's responding to those priorities. That's the thinking.
How do people know about this?
The problem comes in. It's not that citizens don't engage. In invited and uninvited, because citizens also organize themselves as residents associations and engage with county. The problem is that there's an assumption of rule of law and responsiveness on the part of government officers. And this has, the challenge with public participation has been citizens show up, they engage, they give their demands, they then expect a response, they don't get it. Why don't they get it? One, maybe the county doesn't have enough resources, so it's prioritizing some other things. Number two, the public participation process is dysfunctional. 3, political will. 4, corruption. So because of all these factors, our public participation process is not responsive. In Nairobi, it's been particularly bad, and what happened is by the 3rd year, citizens had figured out, we are going for these meetings, we are giving submissions, they're not getting taken up. So in about 21, the figure may be slightly lower, citizens showed up and blasted government and said, we are not giving you our priorities because you didn't implement last year.
Yeah.
Right? So the point is, as we sit here, we have to recognize the Constitution anticipated rule of law, and it anticipated government would make efforts to comply with the law.
With the people.
But did
right?
they?
But they didn't. So the problem we're having actually is not our legal system, it's our political system. And the question we need to ask is, how do we enable citizens to influence a government that can violate the Constitution and ignore a court directive, because that's what's happening. You've had...
I think citizens should come from that default position.
Yeah.
That because you're coming from, you're changing the way we've been governed for the longest, then you should assume that this government is not going to be responsive. Come from that default position. But then the citizens themselves need to be aware. Like all those things that you're saying, yes, citizens engage, citizens are invited, they engage. But what percentage of Nairobi voters, for instance, is aware of all these things?
And this is where I wanted to go with this. If I can just ask
somebody took a default position.
If I can just ask so that you can combine this answer with what you're saying. Because what Eric is saying is extremely important here. Because there could be a small percentage of people who are engaging, but development begets development. If people are not aware that people are engaged, if people are aware that others are engaging at whatever level, it gives them impetus to actually be engaged in the future, which is why we're asking at this point, who is aware of this participation? Some of it we're hearing for the first time today.
No, I'll tell you something, and be very careful when you talk about awareness about public participation processes, because the professional middle class, upper class are actually the least aware because they don't rely on government services. At the local level, people are aware because they rely on public services. Now, the problem is, of course, the notices for public participation usually are put up just a few days before. But there has been awareness, and there is participation, by the way, and there are records of it. And it's not perfect, but it's there. So one, we need more civic education. We need better. The last 2 years under Sonko, ironically, the process for budgeting was actually becoming more deliberative, because of the role of civil society actors working with the county. And the budget office had accepted. We are getting into meetings and people are, shouting us down and threatening us. Can it be more deliberative? So they were actually saying, okay, we'll review. This is what we did. And this is why we did up to there. Because, so it was improving. Because these officers have been doing public participation all this time, and they are learning and they are listening.
Yeah.
But political leadership. And the political leadership is the governor and also the county assembly members. The other problem we've had with public participation is that MCAs view the public as their territory. So the County Government Act anticipates that the ward administrator will be the point of public participation at the ward level. And this should actually even go to the village. And this person is required.
The ward administrator is from the executive.
Executive arm. So there's an executive arm created, governor, sub-county administrator, ward administrator to the village. And these people are supposed to do public participation on government policies, government budget, response to service delivery issues.
And they know all this.
Yes, they do, by the way. for us, we engage with our ward administrator. Now, the problem comes in two things. MCAs don't like to hear that there
Somebody
is a ward
else is engaging with the
because
public. Yeah.
MCAs only see votes.
Yeah.
And they're like, now, if this person can solve that problem, what will I do? So we have had actually a very, very big tug of war on public participation because of MCAs. And it's a mindset issue.
And are they involved in these processes when you have them?
In Makueni, they've been not the first time, but they've been able to integrate them into their public participation process.
And the problems that you raised, do they still exist once they've been incorporated?
Of course, they exist because of our political culture, but they're mitigated. By the way, there is no perfect scenario. What you can do is militate. You
mitigate
you mitigate, and you allow. It's not going to be perfect because we're building a culture of democracy where there was none. And citizens themselves, when they engage with MCAs, are handouts mentality.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dysfunction. The point is, there has been a lot of public participation going on. The productiveness, the quality could be below par. In some areas, it's actually tokenistic because you'll have some.
Wait, did I hear you say that the bribery process that we have among politicians amounts to dysfunctionalism?
Sorry?
The bribes, when you talk about MCAs and the tokenism where people come knowing they may be given something, you mentioned that it sort of like indicates a form of dysfunction. And I'm asking, is it actually dysfunctional?
No. We're talking about public participation.
Yes.
And the efforts and the fact that there has been public participation. There have been some good results in some of the counties. Nairobi County, there's been some results. For instance, healthcare workers were able to agitate and have their allowances increased because they organized themselves around this issue. When we reviewed the budget sometime in 2016, we found that the national government was actually responding to citizen priorities. But when it came to actual expenditure, they weren't spending on what citizens wanted. So, for instance, citizens came and said, we have a problem with solid waste. It's a big issue. The county said, solid waste. We have to do this, do that. But instead of giving citizens what they asked for, they then went and procured trucks.
Yep.
So the catch is this. So what do we say? There's technical processes have been set up for public participation that presume a political leadership that's aligned ideologically. And that is not working.
But I'm saying,
and I was looking at the Swiss example because, of course, we're going to be hosting the Swiss ambassador. And I was like, now this is where we got it wrong. Because we put public participation almost as an optional. It's a value and a principle in the Constitution. But when you look at the force, the ability for citizens to require government or force government to take up their proposals, it's not there. Because the final buck lands and ends with the politicians. For instance, Swiss example,
because I can see
Swiss
City
example,
wanting to jump in.
yeah. Swiss example, they don't have a constitutional court. When there are constitutional matters of interest, the final say is with the citizens. Bang. Then they have a culture of bottom-up sovereignty. So that they've taken what we are calling public participation to a bottom-up sovereignty where the lower level of government is very empowered and the voice of the citizen is equally very empowered. So what we need to do is to go back and
that's where the pause is, so that you can come in and say what we need to do at 11 minutes to 8 o'clock. This is the conversation that continues. This is the Situation of Kenya's biggest conversation at 11 minutes to 8 o'clock. Good morning.
.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. You are tuned in to Nairobi's #1 soul station, Spice
At 10 to
FM.
8, from 8 to 9, we'll be having Dr. Rao.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Coming to give us the sweet devolution examples, borrowing from the conversation that we're having in this hour.
Mornings done right.
And of course,
94.
what is being raised by our guest host this morning, Wajiro Gekonyo, is citizen participation and citizen engagement, and ensuring that citizens are the ones that make the decision. This is what is envisaged in the Constitution. This is not what is being practiced on a daily basis, of course, by both levels of government, at the county level, at the national level. And, well, they sort of back and forth that we've been having in the last 15 minutes has been, are citizens aware of their duties and responsibilities? Are the elected leaders aware of their duties and responsibilities? Of course, you've told us what has been happening so far in terms of setting up those structures, and you're saying that the structures have been set up, a lot has been done to set up the structures. Are citizens aware of those structures and responsibilities? Because I want to still go back there. Yes, citizens may come and participate, citizens may engage, citizens may feel that they engage on certain levels, say in budget making process, but on the political decisions, are they engaging?
Yes, citizens are engaging, and studies show that there's more public participation than ever before, and in fact the levels are pretty high, but the ability of those citizens to influence the outcomes of whichever process, that's where the problem comes in. And so, of course, apathy and disaffection will set in. And the point I was making is that the problem we have is, in Kenya, we have a devolved system of government, and that word devolution is not used in many country contexts, because most countries will go for a federal system where they give really the political power to the lower level of government,
to the devolved
level of government. But in Kenya, because we are unitary, we are coming from a highly centralized state, the politicians would not have that total transfer of power, so we went for a devolved system. This devolved system, actually, we've realized now, in many ways is muting the political power of the devolved level of government and of the citizen. And my view is, rather than re-centralize, as the president is trying to do in Nairobi, and like I said, citizens must resist because it's totally unconstitutional and illegal, rather than re-centralize, we need more devolution. We need to decentralize services to the lowest level possible. But if we were to talk about constitutional referendum, there are a number of things that would need to happen. And, borrowing on the Swiss example.
This one, I have to chime in here.
But I haven't finished.
Allow me.
I'll try and be quick. I'll try and be quick.
Yes.
I'll try and be quick. Number one.
Yes, that's the whole point.
Number one,
I want to
I'm not letting you interrupt,
conversation.
because I liked the fact that the Swiss don't have a constitutional court. The final say is with the citizens, and the citizens then become the final defender of the Constitution. Referenda are then not subjected to parliamentary approval as we have in Kenya, so that when citizens say we are fed up and we want a referendum question, that referendum will be determined by the outcome of that referendum. The last point is that there's a balance between, they have a bicameral house like Kenya has, but there's a balance of power between the upper and the lower house. In Kenya's situation, the National Assembly, the Constitution anticipates that they are equal, doesn't quite say, but in actual fact, the National Assembly has more power. So there's a need to balance the powers between the houses of Parliament. So if there was any constitutional amendments that actually, these are the constitutional amendments that are needed. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, in line with civic engagement, civic governance, this is something that we will need to pursue, because otherwise we are playing in a political field that is rigged against citizen interests and against the interests of the sovereignty of people, self-determination of the people.
So it is a fait accompli in this case?
It is a fait accompli. The transfer process is a fait
it's
an attempted fait accompli, but we will resist.
I'm cheering you.
You are aware that when you are sitting next to me and she has weapons of mass destruction next to her, I don't want any of those flying in my direction. I'm referring to the biro. You see, everything we're saying here points to something very straightforward, and that is the democratic process that this country is going through in understanding where and how it ought to deal with its issues, specifically this one that we keep referring to as the bringing down and ensuring that services are available at the most basic of levels. The country that Wanjiru keeps referring to, Switzerland, is as old as time itself. And for the longest time, they've had their time to go through their processes. They didn't start the way they are now. No, they went through many processes before they got to a place where they found a working formula. And I'm saying we are working through this process. And I would argue we are doing it very quickly. Because if you're talking about public participation, and we are in 2020, and we are talking about the multi-partyism coming in what, 1992, 1997?
That's true.
We've moved fast. If we're talking about in 2010 having a new constitution, and we're talking about this new constitution, and we look at how robust the constitution is, 10 years down the line, we have made significant progress. Everything we're doing is important because it's part of that process of arriving at a point where we understand what and how this thing works for us as Kenyans. And the civil society has done an excellent job in ensuring that this process is moved forward. And this issue of public participation, please understand, participation doesn't mean attending a meeting. Not attending is also participation. It's like...
But being aware is the bigger participation.
That is probably it. And how it is clearly understood that the message doesn't have to resonate with the person who's delivering it, but how it will impact on the person who's receiving it.
I think it's also very important then for being aware, understanding that you as a citizen actually do have a role to play and can agitate for change. A lot of people are not speaking up, or a lot of people are not participating because they are not aware that they can, or that their voice or that their action leads to some
or
kind
they're
of change,
afraid
or that
to
you have a duty.
participate actively.
Because you're not
there's
sure
a
what
fear.
is going to come
Yes.
if you do. And
Going
I think
back
that
to
is
our
very
history,
important to look at.
Participation could lead to incarceration. So you are not going to take a risk of sticking your neck out to be the person who's speaking loudly.
Which is why I'm throwing the barb back at the civil society. I know you've given them a very wild rose, and it's a beautiful one, but the barb here is civil society has a role of ensuring that the public is aware.
If you want me to speak
Civic
loudly on this
civic
matter,
education,
Eric,
civic
let me sit
education.
when Du is speaking, when I'm far
I know,
away from
I know Wanjiru is going to say, I know
we
Wanjiru is
cannot
going to
take
say
the
this is the
role
job
of
of the
government.
government. This is the job of the government. But remember what we said? We are starting from that point where the government, let's assume
They're not doing
that
it.
the government is not going to take up this responsibility. Who else should? Civil society has a very, very critical role in ensuring that people know, so that we can now put the government to account and say, government, now from this point on, we want to be aware about everything that's happening.
I think, Eric, from based, on that premise, I would say civil society's role is to protect the Constitution and to fight against the clawback of the rights, because we're having a very serious reversal, not only of the constitutional dispensation, but of our democratic process.
But, we agree with you.
So our
We
role as
agree
civil
with you.
society is not to step in and do what government's supposed to do. We can't. Government runs, you're talking about 43 million Kenyans and, like a 3 trillion
43,
bob.
47.
47.
Almost
47.
48, right?
Right.
4 million.
Yeah, okay. I'm not trying to rig them
They're
out.
participating.
They're participating. Yeah, right. So you're talking about civil society is quite small, quite thinly resourced. So what can we do? Our role is to protect the implementation of the Constitution.
Okay,
and
just
to
leave
bring
it there. So we'll have the conversation on the role of the civil
you can let
society.
me finish.
We're coming to the top of the hour. City Muga, remind us. Proverb of the day.
The proverb of the day refers to a little animal that we are all familiar with called the lizard. The lizard lies on their belly, but we cannot tell whether it has a belly ache. Figure that one out.
We will. Indeed. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Coming up to 8 o'clock in the next hour, will be with Dr. Ralph Heckner, the ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya. We'll continue the conversation about devolution, borrowing a lot from how the Switzerland has done it. And of course, also having Wanjiru Ikonyo and high experience working with devolution actors in Kenya. Good morning, 8 o'clock.
All right, let's look at where we might have an issue today. It's really around the city because visibility is quite poor with the fog so low. So you want to approach, or rather make sure that your fog lights are up and be very, very careful. There's a bit of traffic on the southern bypass towards Mombasa Road near South Sea, and that's inbound. Outbound on Mombasa Road towards the city centre is not so bad. It's moving slowly, but it's moving, which is a good thing for Mombasa Road on a Tuesday morning. Kiambu Road, 6 lanes now, up from 5, trying to then join Thika Superhighway, get your way into the city centre using the Pangani underpass. That'll happen. It'll take a little bit of time, but it will happen. Waiyaki Way, traffic started at Waruku and far up the road, getting into the city centre as well. The Red Hill bypass into Waiyaki Way at Kitusuru Road will happen for you today. That's an option. Take a little bit longer, but it'll get you where you're going. Gong Road then, from the mix and the myriad that is Kingara Road, Riara Road and Naivasha Road as options, moving smoothly, slowly but smoothly all the same. Let us know what you see. Remember, the fog is low, so please be very careful. Spice FMKE is how you can reach us on Twitter, or 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people
2.5 minutes past 8 o'clock. Good morning and thank you very much for tuning in to Spice FM. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting from Nairobi 94.4, Mombasa 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret 96.7, 90.9 in Nyeri, Malindi 97.7. In the room, my name is Eric Latif. We have C.T. Muga, Ndu Oko. Our guest host this morning is Wajiro Gekonyo, the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Accountability. And we're now joined by our guest for this next hour, who is Ambassador Dr. Ralph Heckner, the Ambassador of Switzerland to the Republic. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I have to say, it's first time with you, and it's a very cool ambiance here in your radio room.
Right.
Just for our listeners, I think it is below zero in this room here. Very Swiss temperatures.
It's because we've put you on the hot seat, Ambassador.
Let's see.
So we wanted to ensure that first of all we make the temperature conducive so that you can absorb the heat. You heard what we were discussing in the last hour. We were talking about devolution in Kenya. Now we know that we'd like to get a lot of lessons, and when Wajiro Gekonyo was giving us some of the stuff that devolution is happening in, how devolution is happening in Switzerland. Just give us the examples of how does Switzerland actually deploy its devolution?
Well, devolution was bottom-up developed in Switzerland. We had about 24 cantons, counties, and they joined forces, and that was in the 19th century. So the federal state was created bottom-up compared to Kenya, where you had a top-down devolution approach. But how that was done is also very different from Kenya, because it was done through a civil war. The question whether Switzerland should be a more centralized or a more federal devolved system and state was fought out in a war. That was in 1847. So here in Kenya, and then that is what impressed me when I arrived here, devolution was done peacefully. The constitution of 2010 was put together in a peaceful way, done by Kenyan experts, not by foreign experts. And especially also the implementation of devolution was done peacefully. And we are talking about maybe the most difficult and critical and delicate political question a country and a people can decide upon, and that is whether you have a power sharing system, a resource sharing system, or a centralized power and no resource sharing between the center and the devolved function. So very much impressed by what I see in Kenya when it comes to a peaceful process to devolve power from 2010 up to 2020.
Switzerland, of course, is regarded as almost an absolute democracy. And we've been agitating and asking ourselves the question, how is it that the voice of the people can be heard and then that translated to changes in the government system? How can that happen?
That's a good question. We have quite a unique system where we let our people participate in the political process. And that is being done twofold. We call it not absolute democracy, we call it direct democracy, because our people can directly vote not only on politicians, as Kenyans are doing. In Kenya, you vote every 5 years who should be the president, the governor, the famous, I think, 6 pieces suit, as you call it. Yes. We do that too in Switzerland. We vote on our who we would like to see in our national parliament or in our cantonal parliaments. But in addition to that, we can vote on issues. That is called a referendum or an initiative, where the people of Switzerland have to express an opinion on an issue. And I can maybe give you 2 examples of issues that we deal with. 25 years ago, I was asked, together with the Swiss people, whether we would like to go for a 20 billion investment in a new railway infrastructure in Switzerland. It was the question whether we would like to modernize our railway infrastructure through the Swiss Alps. So the question was, would you like to build or not the longest railway tunnel on this planet? And the Swiss people said yes. So that tunnel exists today. It's running and functioning. It's environmentally very sound. It is also, when it comes to the finances, in a good shape. So the investment is a sound investment as well. So I feel that this is my tunnel, and I think that is very important when it comes to Switzerland. You vote on a subject and then you own it. It is my tunnel. It is not the tunnel of the Swiss government. It is the tunnel of all the people who voted for that tunnel. Or this year, I have to express myself on pesticides and the use of pesticides in agriculture and the consequences for our drinking water. So the Swiss people on a regular basis are asked to have a political opinion on sometimes very complicated issues. So you ask how we manage our direct democracy. I think the only way that you can manage a direct democracy is that you have citizens that feel fully responsible for what they are doing, that they go to vote. And I just overheard the conversation before. Also, those who are not voting have an opinion. They are okay with whatever is being decided for them. So you have to have as a Swiss citizens, you have to follow politics. You have to be knowledgeable about what's going on in Switzerland. And
is there deliberate policy to ensure that they keep up with the processes of politics and development in the country?
Yeah, it is our way to have the Swiss people participate in the political system. But it was also, it grew also historically. Between 1848 and 1874, Switzerland was a parliamentary
system.
Parliamentary system like Kenya. And because one side won in the Civil War, that side was running the show and felt that at a certain point the people of Switzerland, especially those who lost the war, the Catholics, and the rural areas were getting unhappy and angry. So they introduced what is called a referendum and afterwards an initiative. So you could challenge laws that were made in the Swiss parliament. And it took then another almost 20 years until the first Catholic was good enough to be member of the Swiss Parliament, the Swiss government. So it meant between 1848 and 1891, the one party ruled Switzerland opened up to the Swiss people, gave them the possibility to go for a referendum or an initiative, and also opened up the political system, meaning we had at that time 1 out of 7 members of the government who came from the so-called opposition. So quite a journey, I have to say.
Yeah, looking at, based on your experience here, and of course Kenya is grappling with devolution, it's new. What lessons are there that, that we could learn from, or that spring to your mind with regard to devolution in Switzerland and here, particularly the direct democracy, bottom-up sovereignty, those kind of things?
Well, first and foremost, I would give the piece of advice not to copy-paste a model from abroad. You can be inspired by what you see in this or that country and how this or that system works. But just to copy-paste what is being done in Switzerland will not work for Kenya. Kenya, like Switzerland, we both have our unique challenges and we need our homegrown solutions to that. For that reason, I found it interesting, rightly so, that Kenyan experts were writing the Constitution in 2010. You did not fly in experts from all over the world drafting a constitution for Kenya. But what can be done is definitely that we can exchange on what we see. I give you an example. 7-8 years back, Switzerland wanted to assist Kenya in devolution, to make devolution work in Kenya. And the Swiss Development Agency started to do development projects in the northern counties. Why in the northern counties? Because our assessment was that that region was economically and also when it comes to the security quite fragile. And we wanted to give the northern counties also a chance to have a voice in a devolved system. So we brought the governors of the northern counties to Switzerland so that they see how cantons in Switzerland are working together. And we also put them in a hotel during some rainy days, and they sat together and hammered out what they, as governors from the northern counties, would have in common and could share as strategic objectives for their first 4 or 5 years as governors. So that's how we work. You have a look what we are doing, and then adapt it to what your reality is, because Kenyans know best what is good for Kenyans. So today, when it comes to the frontier to the northern counties, there is a block that is called Frontier Counties Development Council, FCDC. It's not ACDC, it's not a band, it's FCDC. And it is a lobbying club. It is a group of governors that can lobby the central government. And that is important in a devolved system too. Your voice as a governor or as a region has to be heard. So that's maybe an example how we try to exchange lessons, but do not copy-paste systems. You might get some good ideas.
Yes, there's definitely some good leanings there, because we're struggling a lot with the concept of direct democracy, and we believe that's what was anticipated. So, but well noted.
Yeah, I mean, direct democracy exists in a way in the devolved functions, because according to the Constitution, whatever a county is doing, you should consult with your people. So how that is being done, that is important. It is this listening mode that the politicians have to be in. As a official of Switzerland and working for the Swiss government, I always know what the Swiss people want me to do. It is a very comfortable situation, because on certain subjects the Swiss people expressed an opinion, made a decision, and I implement that decision. So I do not feel detached from the Swiss people as a high-ranking official, and the same is true for politicians. And that is what consultation processes are all about.
It's a beautiful model. We'll talk about that more as we continue this conversation. Dr. Ralph Helkner is the ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya. Of course, we'll also be asking him to tell us how Switzerland is engaging with countries within Africa, particularly in the region, East Africa, the East African Community region, and addressing that perception, the global perception of Switzerland as a global financial haven. That's a question that we'll have to ask you, and tell us how also your government has been supporting us in our fight against corruption. Those are questions that we'll be discussing in this hour. Good morning. It's 8:15. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Let's take a look at the weather, and then the conversation continues.
It's a cloudy Tuesday in Nairobi at 18 degrees. Showers expected through the day with highs of 26. In Nakuru at 17 degrees, partly cloudy conditions. Rain to follow later with highs of 27. In Nyeri at 18 degrees, it's mostly cloudy this morning and chance of rain later with highs of 26. At 28 degrees in Mombasa, thunderstorms to come through, keeping highs at 32. 28 degrees in Malindi, rain showers coming through later with highs of 32. 18 degrees in Kisumu, rain will come through as well with highs of 28. In Dar es Salaam at 28 degrees, it's mostly cloudy this morning, thunderstorms later on in the afternoon with highs of 32. 22 degrees in Kampala, thunderstorms expected as well with highs of 26. Down in Johannesburg at 14 degrees, mostly cloudy conditions and some sunny conditions to follow through with highs of 26 and lows of 14. Rounding it out in Lagos at 28 degrees, clear skies this morning, rain showers to follow with highs of 34 and lows of 27.
Chilled Spice. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
This morning, this is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. In the room, my name is Eric Latif. Let's do a call to Muga, our guest host.
Mornings done right.
And on the hot seat,
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
What I hear the ambassador saying is that they have actually gotten the point of near perfection of the devolution, meaning they actually carry out the wishes of the people. The problem we seem to have in our country is that leaders seem to think they know and understand the wishes of the people, and everything they do is in the name of the people and for the people, even if it is their own wishes. Therein lies the disconnect. Because essentially, when leaders take the view that they know and understand, if you look at our entire thinking process and why devolution seems to be a problem is, you want to get people to understand that the opinions they have, because they have them, matter, and that they should be taken into consideration. But the practice of it is, we wait for leaders to tell us what to do. Now, at that rate, Wanjiru, do you really see us making progress?
City, we agreed. It's not that we are waiting for leaders, but there's the relationship. Our political culture is what needs work. And I think if we put it in the context of what the ambassador said and what we were discussing before, is the Constitution is our revolution. It's a revolutionary document and it requires activism to bring to the fore. But there are some aspects of that Constitution that were muted to accommodate the various interests. And those are the ones that we should be addressing, because direct representation, bottom-up engagement, not only philosophically is it a challenge for our political leadership, but actually in implementation. But I think if we went back to the Swiss, the Swiss example, there was a civil war, and that's how the negotiation take place. And I think then people come out really appreciating what they own. So our role as civil society in defending this constitution really, I think this just re-emphasizes that we need to continue selling the constitution. We don't have to go through violent conflict.
Yeah.
I
But
think we've
think
had
about it.
episodes,
Yes.
but we don't want to say that until more blood is shed. Having said that, we need to do what's necessary.
Think about it. How is
within the law.
How is leadership perceived in this country? How do we perceive leadership? If you are to ask,
It's problem solvers.
precisely somebody
Servant leaders.
no,
As what they're supposed
No.
to be.
How we
I always
perceive
look
them?
at what
No.
we
what they
aspire
ought
to.
to be
You know
and what they are.
Wajiro, you're another class of citizen. Eh?
Yeah.
You are more engaged. The ordinary citizen looks at leadership as problem solver.
Yes,
I have this
direct
problem.
descendants from God.
Yes,
Yes.
this is it. This is who I'm supposed to be, right?
When I have a problem, I go to you.
But I think with devolution, when it comes to the Kenyan citizens, at least 20% of the budget, if not more, goes to the counties. So,
In theory.
but there goes money to the counties.
Yes.
So
Again, in theory.
Goes to the counties.
City money goes
You're
to the
making
county.
life very difficult.
no,
for
no.
the
Oh no, I'm
ambassador.
not. I am merely stating the fact. But, Your Excellency, please continue.
money goes to the counties.
Yes, that it does.
and is invested there, and
Yes.
the people can assess what's being done with the money.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 2 years ago, I toured all the northern counties, and I was impressed to see that the investments were done in healthcare, in schools, in roads, in markets, etc. So the people of Wajir can assess and could assess what was being done over the first 4 or 5 years of devolution under the first governor, for example. And they were also responsible to hold that governor responsible for what was being done. So it goes two ways. You need responsible politicians, but you need also responsible citizens. And maybe with devolution, that development of responsibilization of the Kenyan people has started. And when it comes to political leadership, I mean, there are some good governors in Kenya, and that might be the next crop for the national leadership. So a devolved system is also a system where you can test ideas and test politicians in the counties, and the Kenyan people see whether a governor is doing a good job or not such a good job.
I think the example you give of the northeastern, former provinces of Kenya is actually real. But the other reality about the northern part of Kenya is that even at the point of devolution, they had next to nothing. So any sort of progress could easily be seen because it was the first time they were experiencing those things. These things that other parts of the country had taken for granted, they had never seen them. If you're talking about a tarmac road, you're talking about a certain level of healthcare, you're talking about a water supply. These things that many parts of the country had seen and taken for granted.
So you see some money went to the counties.
Yes,
And you see devolution
it's my issue is with the percentage. And
Something goes.
Yes, and my issue here is they're a perfect example, and Your Excellency, thank you, because it tells you what can be done if you actually get money going to places where it's needed. Now, imagine a situation where it actually got to do what it was supposed to do in the quantity it was said. A lot more would have been achieved. That really was
Sure.
my point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I think that links us to the issue of corruption.
Yes.
Corruption is a national problem.
Yes.
It's a problem that has been incentivized in our political system, and unfortunately has been, socialized in the way we transact. And in fact, if we were to unpack the Stockholm syndrome we were talking about, some time back, citizens have come to expect favors from government because systems work so imperfectly. And so this dependency has really been ingrained, and we're in this vicious cycle. But there's one aspect of that which links to illicit financial flows. And now that we're moving into a global context, we've seen the impact of high-level borrowing by government being able to get into large contracts to then implement projects. And these proceeds are not always reaching the country. And of course, I want to bring the ambassador in here because I know this is a question that's often asked to you because of Switzerland's status in terms as a financial haven. What measures are in place to help to deal with corruption? And do you think that Switzerland's neutrality and financial status is used to really impoverish countries by unscrupulous private enterprises working in cahoots with governments?
No, thank you for this question. First and foremost, what you see in James Bond movies isn't true anymore. I like James Bond movies. My wife doesn't. But in James Bond movies, you normally see this supervillain who's putting the UK government under pressure and threatens to destroy the United Kingdom and the world for ransom money that is then be wired to a secret numbered account in Zurich. So this isn't the Swiss financial center today, full stop. And we have come a very long way. And let me explain you that a little bit. Today we have anti-money laundering laws in place, which we hadn't a couple of years back. Today we have processes in place to fight the financing of terrorism. We have a long-standing history and policy to block and return assets from crime and corruption to countries. We have also a prevention mechanism for so-called politically exposed persons, PEP. These are politicians, high-ranking officials. If you are a high-ranking official or a politician abroad and you would like to open a bank account in Switzerland, there are some precautionary measures that apply to you, much more than for a normal client. We have now a policy even that a client has to prove that the money that he's putting in a Swiss bank account has been taxed at home. And something totally unheard of 10, 30 years ago, Switzerland is exchanging financial information with countries abroad. So when I started my diplomatic career in 1997, the main mission that was given to us young diplomats was to defend Switzerland's banking secrecy. My mission today as ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya is to prevent illicit flows, to combat corruption, and to work with my host country to combat corruption. And I do that very thoroughly because Switzerland has to prove that the James Bond image isn't true anymore. So the national interest is that we prove, that I prove as a Swiss ambassador to the Kenyan people, that we mean business when it comes to fighting corruption, when it comes to fighting illicit flows to Switzerland. So during the last years, I had quite some important moments when it comes to the fight against corruption and our cooperation with Kenya. I had the deputy prosecutor federal in town. I signed a MOU with former Attorney General Githu Muigai. And that MOU was important and is important because for the first time, the Swiss and the Kenyan law enforcement agencies can contact each other directly. Normally, this is being done via the diplomatic channel. So that means a Kenyan DPP can call the prosecutor federal in Switzerland, discuss a case, and especially discuss how to write and frame a mutual legal assistance request to Switzerland so that Switzerland can agree to it and reply positively to it. That is very important because we have the British jurisdiction and legal system and we have the French one. And last but not least, in 2018, the president of the Swiss Confederation visited Kenya, and the main point there was the signing of a framework for the return of assets from crime and corruption to Kenya. And that was a huge message to the Kenyan people. And the message arrived where I wanted the message to be heard of, at the level of the Kenyan people. After the visit, I went to the National Zoo with a friend from Switzerland and I bumped into a Kenyan safari driver. And when he learned that we were from Switzerland, he said, "Oh, Switzerland, you're returning our money
Yes.
to us, the people." So this is a huge change, and I would like to finish with that. This is a huge change. Switzerland changed from here to there. when it comes to how we did business as a financial center. And when it comes to Kenya, my message is if Switzerland can change from here to there, Kenya can change from here to there when it comes to corruption too, because it always needs two to tango. To be corrupt, but also to not be corrupt.
If we talk about money that, let's talk about the agreement that the Swiss government had with the Kenyan government. Can I assume that some money was returned or is in the process of being returned back to the country?
Let me start by the countries that are part of the framework agreement on the return of assets from crime and corruption to Kenya.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. This is Switzerland, this is UK, and this is Jersey, together with Kenya. And all the countries, Switzerland, UK, and Jersey, have a policy and a track record and a history of blocking and returning assets from crime and corruption to the countries and the people of the country of origin. And all the three countries had or still have money blocked. And that was the reason why we joined forces, UK, Jersey, Switzerland, and Kenya. And the framework is a kind of agreement that puts in place a structure how to deal with the return of money to the Kenyan people, and also the principles how that should be done. And there are two important principles there. First, the money goes back to the Kenyan people. And as a Swiss ambassador, I will make sure that the money goes back to the Kenyan people and not into the pockets of a corrupted official or any other Kenyan. And the second principle is partnership. It means that Switzerland and Kenya have to come up with an agreement how to return the money. And I give you an example how this was done, for example, with Nigeria, because one of our journalists here is from Nigeria. In the late 1990s, General Abacha died, and the Swiss government declared the Nigerian government under Abacha a criminal organization, and with that was able to block all the money that Abacha had siphoned from the oil revenue and from the Nigerian people. We found 700 million US dollars in Switzerland just from General Abacha. We're not talking about his son. And that huge sum was returned to the Nigerian people. It was done through an agreement between Switzerland and Nigeria, and it was done through development projects, which were then overseen by the World Bank. So you had a triangle. You had an agreement of two governments and the World Bank overlooking the implementation of the development project, so that the money that was stolen from Nigerian people was given back to the Nigerian people. So when it comes to VREC, that's exactly how it will be done.
So it's calling for accountability. I have some questions when I hear that. When I hear that, the money will come back, but it has to be implemented through somebody else and oversight by somebody else, instead of it just coming to a national treasury where we can steal it again, or we can put it to better use or other use which the people of Kenya decide to use. Let's take a short break, but Ambassador, we have in the studio Dr. Ralph Heckner. He's the ambassador of Switzerland to Kenya, and of course he's in the hot seat. He's been telling us the work of the Switzerland government and the Kenyan government on that front. 26 minutes to 9 o'clock. Let's take a look at traffic and then the conversation continues. Good morning.
All right, not looking much different, folks. All stops all the way to Mathaiga. Still serious traffic situation. Getting off Thika Road today, a lot slower than you would have anticipated. The weather's not helping matters either because the fog is quite low, so visibility then is affected. Thick mist on Langata Road all the way to the Galleria and coming down then to the T-Mall roundabout. So everybody's going a lot slower. That means then traffic is in a bumper-to-bumper situation. Coming off Mombasa Road as well, it's slow, but it's moving steadily all the way to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, and then on to Huru Highway after that. Getting into the CBD is a bit of a slower affair this morning, but you'll get there eventually, so patience must be exercised today, folks. Looking at other parts of industrial area coming off of there, it'll all spill over onto Jogo Road. Still as far back as Hamza, moving very slowly, but the spillover now makes more traffic on that road. So getting into the CBD, not too quick, but it'll happen eventually. Let us know what you see on Spice FM KE, and we'll see how we can make sure we keep it moving.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Kenya's biggest conversation.
Mornings
also in the room
done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
My name is Eric Latif and Nduo Call.
Of course, looking at that, coming off of what Eric asked, why the necessity to have then a third body to make sure that these funds are adequately used once there's the repatriation of the funds?
Well, US President Reagan said, trust but verify, and that's exactly what we do. You have to be sure that the funds returned reach the people of the country of origin. So a third party can be very helpful because the World Bank, for example, has the objective to do development. They know how to do development projects, and for that reason, they were chosen to return the assets to through projects in Nigeria. But that can be done also totally differently. For example, in the Philippines, the Marcos money was returned to victims of human rights abuses, and that was a very long process because you had to adapt the national legislation in the Philippines. You had to come up with a list, a verified list, audited list of people who were victims of human rights abuses, and the Marcos money then was returned to those persons identified.
Mr. Ambassador, it sounds like one of the key partners, of course, in this is the country, would be Kenya.
Yes.
And I think the question Citi had asked is, how well have we utilized that agreement? What funds have we successfully asked for, repatriated? The Anglo leasing had some money in the Swiss banks. I don't know whether that has come back. And, you know, what we want to know is, how is our country doing? And,
So, UK has already returned assets from the chicken scandal. Chicken Gate scandal. Based on the experience how that was done and with the Kenyan government, the UK government approached us here together with Jersey to come up with the idea of hammering out a framework how this should be done. And the idea was to do it quickly and to do it in a more structured way. Now, Jersey is about to return money. Negotiations are going on, and they are going on. And Switzerland has blocked $2 million when it comes to Anglo leasing. So this is a small amount of money compared to what we were talking about Nigeria. But returning $2 million would be a huge political message. Thanks to our mutual legal assistance, the Anglo leasing case is in the courts of Kenya. So I cannot say how long that will take, and I cannot go into the details of what is going on in the Kenyan courts, but it shows that we are moving forward. But it also shows how long it takes to move forward and then wrap up such a corruption case. But with FREC, and that I think is the good news, we are ready to then quickly return our assets to the Kenyan people. So FREC is a kind of a preparation Thanks to VREC, we are prepared well to do that quickly.
Is this for the long haul, Dr. Heckner?
What do you
Is
mean?
it, I mean, in terms of this is help it's help that's coming to countries across the continent. Is this partnership or things that we see for the long haul in terms of policy of the Swiss government with partnership with
Yes.
African countries?
Absolutely. I mean, our policy to block and return assets has now a history of almost 30 years. And when it comes to Kenya, how we, Jersey, and UK are returning assets to Kenya and how this is done with Kenya, we can write a new chapter in that history. If that is done thoroughly, if this is done intelligently, creatively, quickly, etc., in partnership, we can add to best practices how that can be done. I'm talking about 3 countries that have a track record to return assets.
Right.
There are other countries that just take the blocked assets and put them in their own treasury department, and then they are building roads on the North American continent, for example. So it could also be a way to interest other countries to do the same, to come up with a asset return policy. It's not enough to block assets in your jurisdiction. You have to go the extra mile. It has to be repatriated to the people of the country of origin. So I hope that FRAC will have many more countries joining countries that have money blocked from crime and corruption in Kenya.
I want to move away from corruption a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot bit. The Uteli College stands out as one of the most significant development assistance projects that this country has ever received, and it came from Switzerland. What other development projects is Switzerland involved in the country currently?
As I said, today we focus on the northern counties. In the northern counties, we support the pastoralist community because the needs in the northern counties when it comes to the people are linked to the pastoralist community. So we invest in water management because the animals need water, the pastoralists need water. We invest in livestock management. You have to be able to manage your cows and goats in a way that you can also make money and that it is sustainable. We invest in health, the health of the pastoralists, but also in the health of the animals they have. And as I said, we invest in making devolution work for the northern counties through the Frontier Counties Development Council. And this has been done together with other agencies, other countries and development agencies, but this is also done with the private sector. So when it comes to water management, we try to work with not only other development agencies, but we try to bring in the private sector as well.
So specifically, if you're talking about water, what do you do? Dig boreholes? What do you do? And then with health, what exactly do you do?
Invite my head of corporation and he will be much more knowledgeable than me.
You see, why I ask is because the government, through devolution and even through just the national effort, also lays claim to ensuring that development reaches these areas. What I'm actually asking for, how do you distinguish the two? Or do you work in cooperation with the government so that the government efforts also incorporate your effort?
Now you give me a question that I can answer.
Yes.
We work with the county administrations. For example, when it comes to livestock management, we work with the different, what is it called, CCs? Of the
CECs, yes.
Of the counties that are dealing with livestock. We bring them together so that they have one livestock policy, and we link them with the CCs for health of the region as well. So we don't do that without the county governments, because otherwise it would be a futile exercise. It has been owned by the county administrations at the end. And for that reason, we did not only work with the governors, because the governors can be voted out, and quite a lot of Kenyan governors are normally voted out by the Kenyan people. So for that reason, we put a second layer in our cooperation efforts, and that was with the administration of the counties, and the CACs dealing with livestock health, etc.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, there's also interest in TVET on your part. Could you explain why and what opportunities you see in Kenya?
No, thank you for this question. Let me maybe explain a little bit the Swiss system so you understand where I would like to go to and where I come from. 70% of the Swiss young pupils at school go into TVET. Only between 20 and 30% are going for a high university degree. And the Swiss parents are pushing their children to go into TVET. That is a big difference when it comes to Kenya, because I had conversations with Kenyan parents, but also youngsters who said, well, I'm a failure, I can't go to university, now I go for TVET. Well, in Switzerland, you don't feel that you are a failure if you go for TVET. 70%, as I said, of the young Swiss go for TVET. And there's lots of money to be made in TVET as well. I can elaborate on that too. So that is the first point. You need a mindset of the people that TVET is something positive to go for. And the second point is you need a good cooperation between the government and the private sector. In Switzerland, the government provides for a good education and for TVET institutions. But the private sector has specific jobs, first-time job opportunities for young Swiss. So if you want to be an electrician, for example, the head of the company that is having electricians and is doing electrical works all over Switzerland, has specific on-the-job training positions for youngsters. They earn a little bit less than they would as a real and well-educated and trained electrician, but at the age of 16, if you earn, I don't know, maybe 1,000 Swiss francs, even in Switzerland, this is nice money. All my colleagues who went for TVET at the age of 18 had a car. A new one. I had a second-hand car at the age of 30. So what is needed is the private sector stepping up to the plate. And I can give you an example how important the private sector is for TVET. There's a Swiss business here. It's called Bühler. They produce high-tech mills. So the chapati that you're eating, that flour is normally milled. Or there's a high chance that that flour has been grained by Bühler mills. But they invested in an African milling school here because what they saw is there's a need of high qualified millers to operate their high-tech mills.
Yes.
And a Swiss company turned Kenya into a hub for TVET for millers. On the African continent, Middle East and Pakistan. So here in Thika, you have people from Nigeria, from Pakistan, Rwanda, Kisumu, the United Arab Emirates, etc., all training to turn into a more professional miller. And they are all sent, and that is also a little bit the Swiss system here, they were all sent from the owners of their mills. So, for example, the owner of a mill in Kisumu has chosen 1, 2, or 3 of his millers to go for training. And the return of investment will be that they are able to operate the mills better, maybe having a better flour at the end of the whole process, making more money thanks to that. So this shows you how important the private sector is. And here in Kenya, I think the private sector can do much more.
Have we made, in Kenya, can you see that the connection has been made then with what TVETs would be able to do for the general population in the future?
And that's a very good question. But Ambassador, before you get there, let's take a short break at 10 minutes to 9. And we come back and Dr. Heckner will answer this question. And of course, now we are discussing TVETs, and it's very interesting to hear that, the example of Switzerland, again, devolution, now you're going to TVET. We can borrow a lot from Switzerland. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Take a short break and then allow the ambassador to have a sip of water, and then the conversation continues. Good morning. Nduokoi, if you don't mind, repeat that question to the ambassador.
Right, I mean, looking at the
Spice
private
FM.
sector and its role and how important it is, have we made the connection? Can you see that the connection has been made between TVETs and their importance and what they can do, really?
I think what has been done is by the government to come up with a new TVET policy and also to put more emphasis on TVET institutions. So the link now from that governmental TVET policy to the private sector is important. And it is very important because in Switzerland, the private sector is also influencing the curricula of the TVET institutions. So at this point, I think it would be important that the Kenyan businesses are jump on that opportunity of a newly defined TVET policy, provide first job opportunities to young Kenyans, aim for quality welders, quality electricians, because if you have a look at Kenya and the wider region, there's a growing middle class in Kenya. They all need furniture. They want to have a house, so they better have a good roof and a good plumbing system and a good electrical system. And even in the region, the whole Eastern African community here is a huge opportunity for growth in general, and is a huge opportunity to serve a growing middle class. So if Kenya is coming up with a good TVET system, government is doing its job, the businesses are opening up to young Kenyans, and the young Kenyans are going into TVET, you can rule the economy of the East African communities. A Kenyan electrician will run the best business in Rwanda or the best business in Tanzania. So it is huge what you can gain also through TVET. I mean, I had a conversation with one of my best friends in the Foreign Service, who is now our ambassador to Chile, and he told me that one of his schoolmates who went for TVET is a very successful businessman today. He has a medium-sized enterprise, dozens of employees, and he's making much more money than my colleague and myself combined together. So he made it. He's making more money than us, and he's creating jobs. I'm not creating private sector jobs as an ambassador.
Yeah. But I hear what the private sector is doing. I'm just hearing a word that may come back from the private sector: incentives. Incentivize them so that they can, give those first-time jobs to the young graduates from TVETs. Does this happen in Switzerland, that the private sector, for example, is being incentivized by the government to absorb the graduates of TVETs?
Yes, but it is also in the interest of the business itself. So if you are a highly qualified furniture-making business, you do not want to have a shady competition when it comes to furniture making. What you would like to have is a highly qualified furniture maker right next door to you and competing on quality. So that is the incentive. The incentive of the private sector is to keep a high level of quality when it comes to what you provide as a business. But TVET is a way of keeping a high level of competition and a level playing field when, if you want so. And for Kenya and Kenyan businesses, the question is, do you want to have, I don't know, Italian furniture makers making the furniture for the Kenyan middle class, or do you want to do that? Because the Kenyan middle class wants to have a certain standard. So if that is your market, you better start working on TVET. So and you can produce your own furniture makers through TVET opportunities in your company.
Mr. Ambassador, I think that's such a powerful vision. And I think just linking to the question that you raised, Eric, we actually have a deficit of plumbers, of technical workers, especially plumbing, electricians. We don't have that. And so we do need the TVET. There is the policy. Unfortunately, government in the present budget, I think also last year's budget, has defunded TVET. Because of debt commitments. So it's back to the same issue about the fight against corruption. It's one thing to have development partners who create frameworks and are willing to cooperate and assist government, but it still comes back to us to ensure that our court are able to litigate and conclude corruption cases like Chicken Gate. That case was concluded in the UK, I think in 2015. Whoever was, the guilty were charged and have been released while we were unable to conclude. So similar to TVET, we have a huge burgeoning youth unemployment. We've got huge number of young people going into informal sector who would benefit from going through TVET. But then government won't fund this because the political decisions are aligned towards large infrastructure projects that have big procurement. So at the end of the day, we can't escape political leadership accountability. And I think
the bottom line.
It is the bottom line. And as Kenyans, as civil society, as media, as Kenyans, this is the question we have to raise to government. So we have development partners willing to work with government, but our political leaders have to put the money where it makes the most impact.
Well, I think it's not development partners. I see Switzerland as a partner when it comes to business. What Kenyans need are jobs, exactly what you said. And TVET is a way of creating jobs. And my mission as an ambassador here is also to attract investors from Switzerland and investments from Switzerland to Kenya. So I had 3 investors group visiting Kenya last year. But sometimes I have the impression that politicians don't know how to create jobs. The way to create jobs is TVET. And you need 3 to tango. You need the Kenyan youth that goes for TVET, as I said. You need a good funded, well-funded and well-thought-through TVET policy by the government and the private sector together. So these 3 have to come together. And if I see the Kenyan youth, I think they're a little bit upset. They're a little bit upset about their situation, maybe even angry. So you better focus on jobs for the youth.
But Ambassador, we want to thank you very much for coming to visit us this morning, and we'll invite you again so we can have more conversations on this. I hope you've enjoyed the hot seat. It wasn't as hot as you thought. The heat is up now. It's not as cold as it was when you started the conversation.
Absolutely true.
So we just want you to give a message to the Kenyan people as the government of Switzerland.
Well, my message to the Kenyan people is that I'm very positive when it comes to Kenya. I'm mindful of the fact that especially these days, this is a tough moment for the global economy and the world at large. But I have been here in Kenya and I saw and felt how Kenya moved forward. This is a country that moves forward. And this is a country that has the potential to move forward like a rocket. if I have investors from Switzerland that are flabbergasted by what they see when it comes to fintech in Kenya, if I have a Swiss pilot with a airline here in Kenya who is telling me how much infrastructure development he has seen just over the last couple of years, just flying over Kenya, you have to be and you can be positive. So I will leave Kenya around July, and I'm sure, observing Kenya from a distance, I will see Kenya moving forward, and at a certain point, Kenya will move forward like a rocket. With this strategic position that you have between Asia and Central Africa, the best is yet to come. Again, Ronald Reagan, although there are other US presidents in the history too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ralph Heckner, the Swiss ambassador to Kenya, ending on a very positive note. And on that positive note, we'd also want you to hear an African proverb from C.T. Muga.
Every lizard lies on their belly. We cannot tell which has a belly ache.
Did you get that, Dr. Heckner? Every lizard.
I'm not yet that Kenyan, although I stayed 5 years.
Simply put, appearances can be deceptive.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
Every lizard lies on its stomach, on its belly. We cannot tell which has a bellyache.
Yes.
Well, asante sana. It's 9 minutes. It's 9 o'clock. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Asante sana, Dr. Heckner. Have a good day.
Asante sana. Thank you.
Looking a lot better on Mombasa Road and Thika Road today, where it was a lot slower today. A standstill in certain parts, still the case. Hopefully it will open up. On the Eastern Bypass, getting in and out of Mombasa Road and Thika Road as well, not so bad today. Ngong Road has opened up, so it's looking a lot better. Everything seems to look a lot better around 9 o'clock on many of the roads. Though we have Muthaiga still at a standstill, like we said earlier, coming off Jogo Road and getting into the city centre, not so bad either. We'll see that this opens up for us. On Kiambu Road, still at the 5-lane position, and that should reduce as we go along. Thick mist still being experienced on Langata Road all the way to the Galleria, so everybody still needs to slow down and keep it as cautious as possible. We'll let you know what the rest of it looks like if you do share that information with us as well. SpiceFemKE reaches on Twitter. Let us know what you see, and we keep it moving.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, newshound, a man who believes in punching up, not down.
Broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Kisumu, 102.5 in Mombasa, 87.9, 96.0 Nakuru, 96.7 Eldoret, Nyeri 90.9 and 97.7 in Malindi. We live stream this show this and every morning on www.spicefm.co.ke or also on our social media platforms, SpiceFMKE on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. In the room this morning, we are joined by our guest host, Wajiro Gikonyo, the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Accountability. Now, you heard what the Swiss ambassador was telling us about the example of Switzerland, especially on devolution. What did you make of that?
I am very inspired by the Swiss model, having looked at it a bit, more, in a bit
in greater
of depth.
detail.
Yeah, in greater detail. I was just afraid to say that because it wasn't a lot of detail. It was just a little bit more than before. Of course, we borrowed from the South African system. And the South African system, very much like our system, seeks to balance the centrist forces and the federal forces and strikes a middle road. So actually, Kenya is one of the few countries that uses the term devolved as opposed to federal. And I believe we need more devolution in this country. And we need to begin having conversations about stronger federalist features in our constitution, particularly direct representation, because Article 1 assigns sovereignty, and this sovereignty can be exercised directly
or
indirectly. So that directly has not yet, we haven't started. For instance, referendum. We cannot do a citizen petition for referendum of any meaningful output.
What is a citizen petition?
You can do a popular
initiative.
A popular initiative for referendum.
What is that exactly?
That means
Okoa, no, not Okoa Kenya. Okoa Kenya is one of them, but Punguza Mizigo.
Yeah. So as citizens, we can initiate. Right now, the Constitution gives us powers to initiate a constitutional amendment through a popular initiative. But the process of doing that puts the power back in to the it needs to go back to the county assemblies for one.
Yep.
And then that process, does it go directly to referendum or does it have to go back to parliament?
It has to go to parliament.
Yeah, that's the killer.
From the county assembly, it gets 50% approval of the county assemblies. It goes to parliament and then goes to the people.
So we definitely, and there's no way, for instance, if we were to say we want to slash MPs' salaries, because this is an issue that really aggravates, let them keep the salaries, slash the pensions, because they, everyone's entitled to this huge unearned pension, even if you just... so there's no way you'll get that past parliament. Or if we want to strengthen recall, we want to be able to recall our political representatives because
basically what we're saying is we have layers which stifle direct involvement of the citizens.
It isn't the layers.
It is the layers.
No, it isn't. Layers on their own are just structured. It's an attitude that anyone or anything in leadership in this country has, and an attitude of disregard to the population they're supposed to look after, and a total over-regard for their own interests and importance. That is what you see manifested in what you're saying. So you talk about layers. These layers, if you look at them in reality, for instance, Parliament is a layer. It's a good thing. It's a place where we debate our laws. It's a place where we enact our laws. But here you now have Parliament even deciding how to create budgets. Parliament. We have an entire ministry whose job it is to ensure that such things are done. Parliament has gone and abrogated powers for themselves. You actually ask, where on earth did these guys get these powers from?
That's a good thing.
We gave Parliament powers in the Constitution.
In budget making, that's a good thing, and we can have that discussion. But going back into the issue of if citizens wanted to amend a section of the Constitution, why must it get approval of their leaders? Because that's what we are saying, basically, that you guys want, but your leaders must agree with you. Why?
In crafting the Constitution,
we
have to accept there were settlements that were made, political settlements, that are working against us. And that is why we are now facing the possibility of this Constitution being overturned.
My point is they're not working against us. My point is, if you take the loose term, you have a rogue leadership. Yes. You have a criminal leadership. These are good things. These are things which were supposed to make the lives of the citizenry better. The crafters of this Constitution were very careful. They were taking a lot of what they put down from experiences that we'd had and trying to ensure these things don't occur again.
If you look at other parliamentary systems, the same thing has happened. If you want to look at the Netherlands, for example, if you want to see a change in the way in which the country is doing a certain thing, for example, it still has to go through Parliament. Parliament still then agitates for that change to happen. It still goes through the layers. But you understand that the members of Parliament sitting there have a direct interest in what happens with the people. And I think that's what he's saying at this point. There's no interest.
The structure,
at that point,
as it is
it works.
is okay.
The
Which
structure
structure?
works.
Nothing fault with the structure.
Just
Our
the structure.
structure.
No,
Our-
not just
Okay,
on
I
paper.
am so lost. What are we saying? We know
Here's
we
the
have
thing. I think I get
we
what
know we
I-
have a rogue political leadership.
I get what
Criminal.
CT
The
is saying.
the point I was putting forward is that we designed our constitution in a way that undermines the interests of citizens, because we cannot give effect in the event that our political leadership reneges on the constitution. We have no recourse.
But those are people. But now you can imagine if there were people who had the interests
No,
of
it's
the
a
people
system.
at heart.
That
This is what I'm saying.
system- that
It's the
system will
people.
not have
This is
people
what
that
I'm
work
But they
for us.
don't. But they don't.
The structure is filled by people. And the problem that we've had along this time is people who don't have the interest of the general population at heart. Rogue leadership is people.
I would ask-
It's not somewhere that's inanimate.
At what
it's
point
human beings.
did our entire moral structure subvert itself to the point where wrong became right? Meaning, so long as someone deems it to be right, it is right. It doesn't matter on whose head they trample. It doesn't matter on whose rights they abrogate. But so long as they're in leadership, then they can't possibly be wrong. It's impunity manifesting itself in the most blatant way possible. Now, it's giving a good constitution a bad name.
No, but the point I'm making is it is a good constitution, but it has weaknesses. It was
And
not.
those weaknesses
It
were
was not
infused by the
designed
political class,
exactly.
so that the political class can have the final say. So, for instance, you can argue and say that if you come up with a Punguza Mizigo initiative and you're 1 million of you and you get approval from the IEBC, the point of taking it through the 47 counties is to have more wider public participation. And taking it to a county assembly ensures that there's public participation at that level. So if you look at it, in theory, that's the whole point, is so that 1 million people have come up with this idea, then 47 counties are going to discuss it, so it gets wider publicity and wider participation. But that point of approval by half of the counties, that's where the point is. That's where we are saying the political class says we are the ones who are going to decide whether what you are thinking is right or wrong, whether what you're thinking is logical, or whether what you're thinking should proceed. And that is wrong.
Eric,
Eric has put it very
It can
well.
go to the
And
county assemblies, but they should not be voting on it.
Eric has put
they
it
should
very well.
Go to the county assemblies and come back to the people for referendum.
Our constitution is making a mockery of direct representation. Okay, not a mockery. Our constitution is designed in a way that undermines direct representation, and it undermines public participation, and we have to call it out. And so if there is a BBI initiative required, it has to be that. You see, BBI is proposing to centralize the management of public participation, create an office of public participation that will create some curriculum that we must all do mandatory, rewrite our history. We are under a level of, like I said, we are being directed towards a state that will manage us and will suspend many of the freedoms we are enjoying right now.
The state already manages us badly.
No, it's doing so right now. If you have the amendments that are conceived in BBI, it means we are going to lose ground. We are moving back to mongrel of a dictatorship.
That
So
ground
you're saying
we
you're
lost.
doing well already right
No,
now?
that ground
Wanjiru?
we
I
lost.
think
Yes, we
we're at
are.
a-
We're
that
doing
ground
very
we
well.
lost.
We have a
So here-
progressive
so there's no need for
constitution.
If we
change there.
implemented
I'm
this
saying-
constitution as it is, would
We're doing well.
would be moving forward. If we start tinkering with this thing now, we're tinkering with it with political realities on the ground and also with political interests.
Why is it feeling
superseding everything?
like summer camp in here, or we've gone to Mombasa? It's a bit too hot now that the
All right.
ambassador has gone.
City, you can sort us out on that. Back to the point.
It's right here.
Say please.
Please, City.
Please, City, kindly give us
Could you
a
put us-
temperature we can work
Give us
with.
put us at sub-zero. Put us at sub-zero.
I see. I didn't realize the panel is here.
Yeah.
That's my first stop every time I
You'll
come
get
in.
electrocuted. There's a way. in
There's
which
a
you
way.
handle it.
There's a
Don't
way.
just touch it
And
anyhow.
if you think we're just saying so,
Hiya.
try and see what happens.
Okay, City, I'll be on your good side. Yeah. Once we are off the mic, I'm your best friend. But for now, you're on your own.
See, she's using you the way in which the political leadership is using you as individuals now
Here,
to push their
I am-
particular
But for good
agenda.
purposes.
No, here I'm being told in advance what's going to happen, so
Yeah.
we are okay.
Yes.
We have a situation where there is a complete subversion of certain moral issues. Leadership seems to think that it is their job to lord it over the people who elected them. Everything they do, when we talk about runaway impunity, it's because people feel they can just do what they like. Now, the example the Swiss ambassador was giving us here, they also had that sort of situation. It's not that they didn't have it. They did, but in the 19th century. And they realized, but remember, there are around 8.5 million people, just so that we understand what we're saying. Yeah? But they decided with these 8.5 million people that, you know something, we are not having these people make that decision. What you are suggesting, Eric, it doesn't matter what you say, it has to come back here. And when the people say it is okay with them, then it is okay. But ours, there is a make-believe that you are being asked when the decision was already made.
It's basically being asked a question and being told this is the answer. Give me the answer.
Give me the answer to this question I've asked you, and it had better
And
be
already
the one I've
have
told
the
you.
answer, mind
Actually,
you.
putting it better, being asked for an opinion and being given the opinion.
Yes, this is the opinion. Now give us your opinion.
Yes.
Yes.
Give us that opinion.
Yes.
Is that music?
It's 9:15. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation. Going into a short break. We are going to be having Millie Odhiambo, MP Millie Odhiambo. She'll be joining us shortly. She's on her way. She got stuck in traffic. So, of course, she'll be telling us the traffic update at 5:30 when she gets here. It's 9:15. Let's take a look at weather. Good morning.
At 19 degrees in Nairobi, mostly cloudy conditions through the day. We're looking at highs of 26 and lows of 17. Showers expected later on. In Nakuru at 19 degrees, mostly partly cloudy conditions. Rainy conditions later on with highs of 27 and lows of 16. In Nyeri at 19 degrees, rain expected later with highs of 24 and lows of 16. It's partly cloudy in Mombasa. Thunderstorms expected later with highs of 32 and lows of 26. In Malindi at 29 degrees, highs of 32, rain to follow in the afternoon. In Kisumu at 22 degrees, it's mostly cloudy, and we'll have some rain showers later with highs of 28 and lows of 21. Take a peek into East Africa. In Dar es Salaam at 29 degrees, thunderstorms expected later with highs of 32 and lows of 26. In Kampala, 23 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. Thunderstorms will be the order of the day there as well. In Johannesburg at 17 degrees. It's mostly sunny through today with highs of 25 and lows of 14. And finally, in Lagos, it's clear skies this morning, but it'll open up into rains later. Currently at 28 degrees. Later highs of 34 and lows of 27.
And everything nice, everything nice.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's now 9:18.
Mornings done right.
In the room this morning,
94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Up to now, she's here with us. We're discussing, of course, what we've heard from the Swiss ambassador to Kenya, Dr. Ralph Heckner, talking about the examples of devolution, and then we discussed, why is it that direct participation and direct, what is it? It's direct democracy has been practiced by Switzerland. Why does it work for us, or why we haven't gotten there, directly?
At the end of the day, we need we need good leaders who can implement the constitution as it is. We don't have those, and they're not going to. Yeah.
We do have good leaders.
We don't have those at present.
Actually, we do have good-
we have
we
a
do.
violation.
At the helm.
We have a violation of the Constitution, a systematic violation of the Constitution. So, what are the options? I think what we have to ask ourselves is, where do we go as a country? Is BBI going to get us out of this? Now, I come from the school of thought that says no. BBI will not get us out of this, because BBI fails to place the responsibility on political leaders. It says, Kenya has a problem, we have a values crisis, and it's leaders and the citizens. And I say no. If you look at the power balance between political leaders and the citizens, then responsibility, follows from that. So when you have somebody holding political power, which is our political leaders, violating our rights systematically, adulterating and undermining systems, that creates a values crisis. So the problem with BBI is that it doesn't place responsibility where it should, which is with the political leadership. That have failed. So citizens, we need to make a plan. We need to organize
But
ourselves
we do have a
and
plan.
push back.
What's our plan?
Push back and refuse.
We do have a plan. The implementation is the problem, and how to. It's called the Constitution. Let me give an example of schools and performances of schools. Teachers in this country, throughout the country, are trained in the same institutions. It's not as though there's a specific training for national schools for teachers, there's specific training for other schools in the local areas. Teachers are trained in similar institutions. But what is it that makes the performance of schools differ from one to the other? You'll be told the caliber of students that they take, the area, the other reasons. Now, these reasons here are what, at the end of the day, help determine. But also there's something called the effort of the individual teacher. What teachers? Because you've had teachers doing wonderful things in areas where no one expected such things. It's what you call the individual effort. If you look at our government, it isn't very different. These people we have around here, it's not as though they came from another country. They're just Kenyans like the rest of us. So what is it that makes them uniquely inept? What is it that makes them uniquely thieverous? Is there such a word?
No, the great one.
It actually doesn't
It's okay.
exist.
It's just
Great one.
Yes. But the truth of the matter is that you can blame the environment. It isn't. It is the opportunity provided by impunity. So people figure, I can get away with this thing. And because it then becomes part of our national ethos, everyone does it at every level. That seems to be the model Kenyans have chosen. So any noise that is made when there's a problem in this country, you want to ask, where's that noise coming from? It is usually our person. If it isn't our person, then it's a different issue. Now, we cannot run away
So
from
where are you placing this? Is it?
I am
You said it's not
saying-
the leaders; it's the citizens.
I always say that.
So you said
It's all of us.
I always say that it is.
Miraculously.
Yes, we this is
I
our
know.
country.
We're
We are
the
part of
ones
this
who allow
country.
this to happen.
Yes, we encourage the politicians to do the way because we are the ones who go begging for handouts. We are the ones who follow them.
And
we
then you
are the
go
ones,
put them
yes,
back in
We elect them.
when you elect them.
It is us.
Make the
You know-
decision
We're
yet
the ones
again.
who fight
It is
the
us.
fight against corruption.
It
You
is
know,
us.
when you're looking at Stockholm Syndrome, the holder of power must disempower the dependent. And they do so by continually violating them and convincing them that they're not violating them. And this is what has happened to us. So our rights have been violated. And note, we've been through several attempts to reform our state. We had 1992, we have 2003, we have 2010 constitution. And at each turn, we are not getting to where we want to go. So I put it to you that the problem we have is we have political interests that have continued to roll back the gains of the democratic transition of Kenya. And that's what we are battling with. And that is what, and so that this collapse of values or the widespread failure of values is a symptom of the political capture. So when we are told, let's look for national ethos, that's you're pointing us in the wrong direction. Let's talk about political and state capture. When we have that conversation as citizens, then we are really talking about the real issue.
But we've been having those conversations since even the 90s. What you're talking about, let's change the constitution. The change the constitution movement, the multi-partyism movement was all trying to disrupt that system.
Exactly.
But we've gotten to a point where we are now
independence
saying,
was
the
about
system.
us seeking to be in a position where we can govern ourselves. Is that not so?
It is.
Now, when we had the Mau Mau uprising, which more or less was at the epicenter of what we called our fight for freedom, within that same structure, you had locals who formed part of what you call the home guard. Locals supporting the colonialists because they were employed. And wisdom dictated that the colonialists chose someone who would understand the people who are opposing him the most. You see, why I have to keep going back to us is this. These leaders do not come from some other country, some other planet. They are people we know. They are our cousins, they are our relatives. They are with us. Yes. Even the people who write the constitution, they're with us. Everything around here is homegrown. There's nothing external. This situation isn't external.
It's true. It's true. The oppressor is here with us, but we are not the oppressor.
Oh, yes, you are. The victim...
The oppressor is...
No.
The victim is part of the oppressor.
Yes. You cannot allow oppression, or you cannot accept oppression and then think you're not part of the problem. You are.
Yeah, but that's a chicken and egg conversation.
No, this
Yeah.
is like
Those who hold
continue
greatest power
to
have
take something and
greatest
take
authority.
something
No.
and take it over and over and over again. Gotten to the point whereby you don't need you've said it's okay. I don't have a problem with it, and you play a role. Absolutely,
That
I
is
think
not
we
true.
do play a role.
That is not
I think we do play a role.
People went to the streets in
Earlier on.
2007. That was saying no to stealing the vote.
No, earlier...
2017, people went to the streets. You know, the thing is,
No.
when Kenyans rise up and say no, it's not tidy. Right?
Conflict is never tidy.
Exactly.
Protest is
But
never tidy.
Can you measure that protest?
Yes, you
measure
can.
it for what it is.
Yes, you
It is
can.
a voice saying no. That is when... So the point is, as long as our systems do not give us a structured way to ventilate or to redress violations...
Systems never give you that leeway.
It's not gonna give it
They
to you.
do,
They
of
never
course.
give
We
it
have
to
a constitution that's what Switzerland was telling us. They have systems.
You have
Systems must work.
The system
We must
has
believe
people
systems
who
will
want
work
to
with the right
ensure
leaders.
that that very voice you're speaking of is silent, and that it's silence and silent. Without the element of resist in 2017, this handshake would never have taken place. It's not complicated. This thing had to boil to a point where it wasn't just bubbling, it was spilling over. Then people felt, no, this one...
We have to
perhaps
do something
perhaps
about
a new
it.
conversation needs to take place here. In the absence of that, it would have been business as usual.
All right, so let's now introduce our guest who's joined us in the studio, Millie Odhiambo, MP for Suba North. Karibu sana, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and sorry I'm coming in late.
Yeah, you'll give us the traffic update shortly. In about 3
I'm
minutes.
about to.
In about 3 minutes,
That
we're
I've
going into a
meandered
traffic
all
break.
over.
You'll tell us what roads not to use and what roads you have used and found,
Exactly.
issues happening. You are, of course, an ODM member of parliament. You're here because we want to discuss politics in general, politics of ODM, politics of the National Assembly, the effectiveness or lack thereof of parliament and all that, right? You're prepared for that? We call
Yes.
that the hot seat, where you're seated. And that's why we've reduced this temperature to minus 2 degrees this morning.
Yes.
So it's comfortable for you. This is Millie Odhiambo. She's the MP for Suba North. Today, on the headlines everywhere, is talking about the handshake.
Yes.
We're looking back at the handshake. This is the anniversary of the handshake. Years down the road, the Nation headline is asking, was this a con as well? Actually, the headline is saying, handshake, peacemaker or con game? Answer that, Millie.
Well, I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for peace, you get peace. If you're looking for con, you get con. So for those who did the handshake who are looking for peace, have got peace. But there are people who are always looking for conflict. So even in the midst of a handshake, you will have or you will see room for conflict. So really, again, and I want to agree that it's up to you to decide whether you're a victim or not. Because when you decide, like in this situation, when the president and Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga decided to to go for the handshake when some of us were still stuck at fighting. And we then decided to come along on the handshake. If you see, even politically, I don't talk anymore because I'm very much at peace. Yeah, but then the others who choose that they'd rather be at a situation where people are constantly fighting. Really, you can't. The Constitution give people freedoms, including the freedom to be always agitating. So that's up to you, really. If you want to be always agitating, that's up to you.
But then, if you look at now the fruits of that handshake, so yes, there was that general peace. There was a cessation of hostilities politically.
Yes.
But beyond that, what have we achieved? What have we gotten?
Depends on what the handshake was
Don't
seeking
tell
to
me
achieve.
it depends on the answer I'm looking for. No, give me the answer.
No. I'm not going to tell you depends on the answer you are looking for. I'm saying depends on what the handshake was for. I think a lot of people are thinking the handshake, were expecting the handshake to perform miracles. Like me, I don't have a child. If I was in the opposition, in that sense, I would be expecting the handshake to enable me get a baby. I mean, let's be realistic about our expectations. Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, being the opposition leader, and has had a handshake with President Uhuru Kenyatta, consequent upon which there is a Building Bridges initiative, their best bet is that through BBI, that will have a better Kenyan, where people are more included, so that issues of exclusion that normally makes us fight are an issue of the past. But suddenly, you hear everybody saying there's a milk processing plant in my neighborhood that is broken. The handshake does not fix it. Who told you the handshake was to fix your broken machine? That was not the aim of the handshake. It was supposed to provide you an enabling environment to fix your own issues. It has enabled me it has given me an enabling environment to choose whether I want to go for in vitro fertilization or not. I'm not going to expect the handshake to implant a baby in my womb. Yes, that's up to you, but as an individual.
What would you say to those who say that after the handshake, some criticize the handshake, they felt sold out.
Yes.
After the handshake, those who are on the streets following Baba, who following that, the push and clamor for certain demands around accountability, one being electoral accountability.
Yes.
What would you say to those who feel betrayed that the whole agenda has been sold and that BBI is about a political settlement and we are 3 years in?
Yes, I can tell you actually I'll respond to quite a number of that category, which at the very beginning I was part of that team that felt betrayed. Why? Because our psyche in Kenya politically is always to be at war politically. Our psyche is always to be fighting one or the other person, such that when we have peace, people don't know how to make a paradigm. Yeah, it's disconcerting. You don't know how to make a paradigm shift. Personally, I made a paradigm shift, and I've learned that it's actually very beautiful and enjoyable to just sit and do work for super people without fighting anyone, and to espouse issues of concern for me in the assembly without fighting anyone. And then I think there are people who must psychologically liberate themselves from this mentality that Raila Amolo Odinga must sort out every problem in this country when he is not even elected. That can't be the work of Raila Amolo Odinga. What if Raila were to fall down dead today? Who will be dealing with that? Kenyans must find a way of expressing their concerns. And I've seen actually a lot of my friends, I can tell you, especially my friends from the civil society, they don't know how to deal with it. They're like, oh, Raila, you have sold out. No, he has not sold out. He's giving us a path that might lead us to a better Kenya. And I can take you back to 1997 with the IPPG deal. And I remember, because I was there, I even have a photo to remind me that when we were at Ufungamano, and as members of civil society, we felt betrayed by the political class when they went for minimum reforms, when we wanted comprehensive reforms. And I remember at one point, the late Mishuki telling us, when us as members of civil society, we said, we are not going to allow, we are going to fight. They told us, what are you going to fight with? Stones. What are we going to change with? Not stones. They said sometimes little is better than nothing. So sometimes we must also learn, as those of us who have been in civil society, that little is better than none, and we negotiate and take little by little. Incremental gains.
Right.
So in Kenya, I know that there are times when we feel like we make 10 strides forwards and some backwards. But if you go all over the world, especially Africa, we are way much better than a lot of them because at least we are expressive as Kenyans.
Right. We might be expressive, but there's also, the concern is maybe, even if it's not around Baba, look at what happened in 2017 around the elections. Have those who are responsible for undermining that vote been redressed? Or are you saying that there was no cause for alarm? Because as far as we knew, the procurement process, the management, the IBC was interfered with. Right now, we don't have a properly constituted IBC. So as
that
far
is
as
true.
So when we say that the opposition has been swallowed, the handshake has killed the opposition, it's issues like this. Because one of the key institutions of the Constitution is not in any state to transact business, and it's been conducting by-elections while we are at peace with the handshake. So this peace looks like more of a co-option or an appeasement, because we are saying, fine, we needed peace. We have a collaborative, consultative constitution. We needed that. But we've lost the objective issues that government is picked on.
I want us to go into a break, and where you'll, of course, give us a traffic update shortly. And then when you come out of that,
I love that.
You'll respond to that question. 25 minutes to 10 o'clock. This is The Situation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. In the studio on the hot seat this morning is Honourable Millie Odhiambo, the MP for Suba North.
Spice FM, Nakuru.
Kiambu Road coming along nicely this morning, looking a lot better than it was then, joining the Thika Superhighway and coming down through into the city centre. It's all right now, much better than it was previously. Mombasa Road inbound to the CBD, also looking a lot smoother now. Still coming off Ngong Road will be a bit difficult, but around the city, wherever you throw it, it looks much better now. Traffic are officially over, unless there are incidents or accidents that we should hear about. Do let us know on Spice FM, spicefm.ke, so that we can know what that would be. But apart from that, it seems to be okay, unless, Millie, you've seen a place where things are stuck.
Well, at least technology helped me. Otherwise, I would still be stuck. I'll be waiting for the good news now to make through. But I was using technology
You're looking to find the
and
open spaces.
Help.
It helps, yeah?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Enter handshake, exit
Mornings
opposition.
Done right.
There is no exit of opposition. As a matter of fact, yesterday I slept at around 2 a.m. And I slept at 2 a.m. because I was going through the presentations by the Abasuba community to the BBI. And we have very valid issues that are not addressed in the Constitution. And we have very valid issues that may be addressed in the Constitution but are not addressed in programs. And the BBI looks at all that kind of stuff. And I am going as a member of, going today to BBI as a member of Parliament for Suba North, representing the Abasuba people. And what am I telling you? That even as I'm going, I'm not going as a member of the government. I'm going
You're going as an
a representative
MP.
of
as
the
an
people.
MP elected as an opposition MP. And because of that, I can tell you, one of the curious things that I saw as I was actually working through this document that was worked by the community, so they gave me as the MP to look at it, and every sentence had "we demand." So we are just using a different way. So I've removed all "we demand" and put "we urge." So what are we doing? We are engaging differently. Still doing the same thing, engaging differently. In the opposition, we were demanding, and the government was ignoring. Now, because we are engaging differently, we are urging. And where they can, they listen. So sometimes you use different ways to achieve the same thing.
That what you've
Mheshimiwa.
explained is you and playing your role as a member of parliament. Let's go into the opposition is inside
I'm just
parliament.
giving you as an example.
Mheshimiwa, can I ask?
Yes.
You're telling us, nice phrase, little by little democracy.
Yes.
But what if your assumptions are wrong and you are actually, you've entered into the pit, into the deepest part of the fire? Because while you're doing little by little democracy, our economic system has been captured. And correct me if I'm wrong.
The economic system
our
was
country-
captured even before the handshake.
Yes.
So it has
No,
nothing
no.
to do with the handshake.
But isn't the purpose of the constitution reform
Yes.
to liberate our politics and our economics from state capture?
Yes.
Wasn't that the foundation of it? And
Yes.
wasn't that what the opposition all this time was telling us they are going to do that the state was not doing?
Exactly.
And through the handshake, and while the handshake is going on, devolution, funds for devolution are below the local revenue generated. So actually, constitutionally, even though the matter is in court for determination, the promise that the opposition made to Kenyans was for devolution. And devolution is being underfunded. Nairobi is being re-centralized illegally, and the opposition says nothing. So for me, I'm saying it doesn't add up. I'm not seeing little by little democracy because our gains are being undermined as we sit here and as the opposition shake hands.
Well, what I can tell you for personal reasons, I don't want to get into the Nairobi issue, lest I sound like I'm gloating. But that aside, what I'd want to say is in relation...
No, I
is
think
it
you
wrong
need
to gloat a little bit?
You need to...
No, I don't want to gloat because I have a history with the governor of Nairobi. And because of that, I kind of have been refraining from talking about it, lest I sound like I'm gloating about his misfortune.
Like saying, I
But
told
so
you.
I do
told
not
you so.
want. I don't want to talk about Nairobi.
No, but
I would
essentially
have
you
very.
need to.
What
As you
Mheshimiwa
represent,
is telling us,
as you
he
represent
told
the
him so,
opposition,
but she's not going to say
Yeah.
she told him so.
We can say it for you. That you said
but
so.
but
I don't want to sound like I'm gloating, but what I would want
for
to
the
tell
opposition.
you, yes, but I can
Yes.
speak for the opposition on every other issue. I'm just telling you, I'm not going to talk about Nairobi.
On the position
So
for
I
Nairobi,
want to. No,
is
no,
it
no. I will
legal?
not talk. I will tell you this.
Was the
that-
president right?
I will tell
Leave
you
the
that they
governor.
did not go around it the right way legally, but Nairobi had a problem. That I can tell you for a fact. And I can tell you that as Millie Odhiambo, if you listen to me, and not only me alone, if you listen to us, it's just that you're used to us talking while screaming and pointing
Talking
and
at the
abusing.
top of your voices.
Yes,
Why are
but
you
we are
talking
saying
now?
the same things, but not abusing and whatever.
But where are
so
you
because
talking
of
now?
that,
And how are you helping?
in Parliament? If you
let's hear
listen to us speaking in Parliament, whether it is on the budget, whether it is on governance issues, we are still consistent. Except now, as I've told you, and I was giving you the example of my constituency and the memorandum they're presenting, instead of saying we demand,
You're changing the tone of your
we are
language.
not talking down at the government, but we are talking to the government. And in some they listen, some they may not listen. But also I would want us to understand that other than the fact that, people are not hearing the voices of the opposition, the reality is that in the last dispensation, a lot of things were not done well. There was over-borrowing. There was a lot that did not go right. That is now being manifest now. And so people, when people are saying, and we talked and
It was
talked
it was the
and
same
talked
opposition
ourselves
even then.
hoarse. Yeah. And we talked ourselves hoarse. At that point, when you are saying stop over-borrowing, stop doing this, stop doing that, these projects are not necessary. We are initiating too many infrastructural programs without completing these ones. We talked about them. So really, what we said then is only materializing now.
Does the
It is
Hansard
materializing
does the
now,
Hansard bear
but
you witness?
instead of now shouting to say exactly what we said then.
You're saying
and
it in lower tone.
No, we are not saying it in lower tone. We are
You're not
just
saying it at
We are
all.
saying it courteously.
You're not saying
No,
it
we
at
are
all.
saying it courteously.
Saying,
But
is,
how-
one, saying
No.
is one thing, Mheshimiwa, but
Yes.
also, and I wanted to ask, even in the last dispensation,
Yes.
does the Hansard bear you witness that this is what you said and this is how you voted against some of these issues?
Including
For
being
example, when
beaten
it
and
comes-
my panty being torn in parliament.
For example,
The
when it
answer
comes-
will bear us out.
For example, even when it comes to budget and approval of budgets.
Yes.
Did we see you voting against those budgets?
Yes,
Did
you
we see
will.
Do we see you doing the same in this dispensation?
Yes.
After the handshake.
Yes, you have seen me even after the handshake, where I think the government was not doing right, quite a number of us, on the issue of the interest rate capping. We opposed. We opposed, quite a big number of us. But sometimes, also because the media, you like what sells, you turn a blind eye to
No,
that.
we
when
got
you
the
oppose.
opposition, and we were very
did.
proud
And
of
actually,
you.
what the public said is that we are pretending. Why didn't we amass the numbers? Can I go and beat people to voting with me? If the others don't want to vote, you can't force
There's
them.
nothing you can do.
You can't.
But
But we were a sizable number of us who refused, and we said this is not good for the country. And it was not only that. There are quite a number of things that we have opposed, but there are also others where we have advised. Yeah,
But
I
looking at
sit
how-
in the
look-
budget committee. In the budget committee,
Exactly.
there is quite a number of things that even as a committee member, that we have actually sent, alarms on. If you look at the current budget policy statement, and this is not even just opposition; it's all of us as a budget committee. Because now, because of the fact that we are working cross-party lines, it actually is more. It's actually more beautiful because if I tell my chairman Ichungwa
Your
that
chairman
this is
is
not wrong,
is
it
now the
does not.
opposition.
It's not.
It
it's
doesn't
not,
come across in a conflictory
No,
manner.
it's not even opposition because it's still actually.
He's Tanga. He's now in the opposition.
He's a tanga, but when he's in budget, he's really pushing the
Jubilee,
Jubilee
yeah.
agenda. Otherwise, he'll be out of that position as chairman. So because of that, what I can tell you is that because of that, we are able to talk to each other instead of at each other. And that is why you see the budget policy statement, we are sounding alarms on certain issues that are affecting the country.
Would you say that it is an easier situation to be in to then push for certain things to come through?
Yes, it is. I think so. I think so because in the past, even when you are actually telling the government very valid concerns, they would actually look at you with the tinted glasses. They're like, you are just saying it because of opposition, because you want to you want to gain political mileage. You really not genuine and stuff. I can actually tell you, because now I'm doing my third term in Parliament, that the best parliamentary time that I've ever seen was the 10th Parliament, when we had the coalition government. Why? Because it was almost similar or akin to what we have currently, where we are working together, but then again, there's also that element of suspicion. So we actually still watching, but working together. That's actually what obtains now. So it's much better than last time when we were making noise and people are cheering us out and there's no effect on litmus paper with our noise making.
Can I say, from my observation, one of the big market difference, 10th Parliament, that period, the Kibaki era and now, is the type of leadership. We had a presidency that listened, right? Because even as civil society, we were able to demonstrate during that period. If we saw something was going wrong, violation of the we were able to demonstrate, and we didn't get shot with tear gas like now. Secondly, we had responsiveness from government. If it wasn't the office of the president never responded, but somebody high up, if there was a genuine issue raised, you would see the action. Third point, that government had created space in its systems through the GJ laws, the governance program.
Where I was actually the civil society chair.
For civil society to engage with government.
Yes.
So I put it to you that you the opposition party has misread the times
I
and
don't think so.
has gone into the lion's mouth because we are not in a democracy. We are not able to vote out this government. You know, we voted, we don't know how our vote went. We are not able to engage this government we are decreasingly able to engage them in the courts because courts are being underfunded and have been intimidated. And our devolution is being undermined unconstitutionally with no word from opposition. So I put it to you, we are actually in a de facto dictatorship where even the opposition has been cowered into whispering their dissent to a government that doesn't listen.
Wait.
Okay.
At what point did we, yes, wait. At what point did we enter this dictatorship? Okay, let me ask a more point. At what point
Look at
in the history of our country did we enter into this dictatorship?
Tell me what democratic freedoms are and how we are enjoying them. And I said de facto, and I'll even say it's benevolent. But our key indicators are not good because we cannot count on being able to punish or reward our political leaders through the ballot.
You know, Angela, what I hear you saying.
So that's what I'm saying. First of all, if you cannot count on free and fair elections, you're not a democracy, right? So right now, the opposition shook hands but have not dealt with those electoral IBC issues. As we sit today, it's stated in the BBI, we're like, right, but this should have been agenda number one because this is the issue that brings Kenyans
I think
to
I really
violence.
think that is so.
At
That
least
is
you're facing your alter ego. This is a complete civil society speak.
I was
and
with
you
you
understand,
before.
which you understand. Now you're on that side where you
We
need
are
to
speaking
respond
the
to
same
such
language.
questions.
Yes, okay.
So what I can actually tell you for a fact, because me, I don't only do political speak, I'm very consistent. What I can tell you, which I've even said in Parliament, is that I'm concerned about deteriorating human rights situation in the country. That I can tell you for a fact, and that I agree with Wanjiro. And there are a lot of cases of extrajudicial killings that are going on. And I can tell you that, even the way the police responds to certain issues, I am not pleased with that. And as a member of parliament, an opposition member of parliament, I have told you I'll say that. But if I were to say it in the last dispensation, I will probably tell you Uhuru ni mjinga. But I'm not telling you Uhuru ni mjinga. I am telling you, I am telling you, Mr. President, please, not your people need to do something about the deteriorating situation of human rights violations. In my own constituency, there are a lot of rights in cases of insecurity. And where does this stem from? Unemployment. Unemployment is going off the roof. And we will inform the government that this is something that you need to look at. I just will not shout at the government. Why? Because we are trying to build bridges. So I can point something bad at you without necessarily shouting at you. You can equate it to a marriage. There are people who in their marriages, they fix it by being violent, domestically. But others talk and go for counseling. So for me, BBI is sort of like our counseling.
So this is
The
post-counseling
counseling session we are going through, which we are hoping, it's not an appeasement, which we are hoping will fix some of the issues, including electoral injustices.
There's the perception.
And I'd want to say, let me just respond to something that Wanjiro has raised, that people always ask that what if we find ourselves getting into a hole when we are thinking we are fixing. If you actually look at the opposition history, been there, done that, got a t-shirt, been in hole many times, but it will not stop us from using different strategies to get out of the rut. So this is one of the other ways we are trying
to get out.
But I would want to encourage civil society as well, that I would want to actually tell you that there are also circumstances that are also different. If you realize in 2010 period, the civil society was a very strong and loud voice for many, many different reasons, including the fact that we erroneously decided to classify ourselves as a middle-income economy. Most of the people who are supporting us have left, and thereby effectively kill a lot of the civil society voices. And because of that, we are also operating under very different circumstances with a muted voice of the civil society. And so there were a lot of other things. And with the Trump as the president of America. So really, a whole lot of issues around us have made it a lot more difficult to replicate almost exactly what we had in 2010, but it is a semblance of what we had in 2010.
Let me take the final commercial break of the show. This is at 5 minutes to 10 o'clock. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. In the studio on the hot seat is Honorable Millie Odhiambo, the MP for Suba North. My name is Eric Latif. We have Ndu Oko, Siti Muga, and our guest host for today, Wanjiru Konyo.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
And that honors goes to you, Siti Muga.
Yes, from the conversation I've heard and from
Gender
what
bias.
Wajiro, actually, no, gender parity.
Yes,
Because
this is gender parity. 50 for 50.
you and Millie have been exchanging political... okay, fine. My question is this. Given the conversation we've been listening to, would you say that the Kenyan public and, of course, the civil society are drama junkies?
Well, put that in Kijaluo.
Abiro.
I want to know what junkies is in Kijalu.
In other words, can you just...
Because, you see, the complaint that you
Without
hear
drama.
about the opposition is that we don't see them enough. We don't hear them enough. We don't see them agitating enough. That's the drama.
Okay.
So people have gotten used to it to the point where unless they get a fix, unless they see the drama, they don't
Nothing
think
is
anything is happening.
Yeah. I think so. I actually agree with you. Like for me, a lot of people are asking me, Millie, is something wrong with you? Are you sick?
What happened?
What happened? Nothing happened. I'm actually enjoying where I am. I think a lot of people think that we really enjoy, this melodrama. We do that sometimes when you feel like things are not happening, we have not enough, and we are not being heard. But I want to thank, the wisdom of Baba that he's told us, why don't we try another
path?
And
yes.
that path might actually yield something. Like, for instance, when he came up with the Constitution, 2010 Constitution, yes, we had done the melodrama and the people picketed. Unfortunately, in some parts of the country, we lost many lives. And in silence and in quietness, we attained the Constitution. And unfortunately, not many of us have actually been brave enough to write the experience of that 10th Parliament. But I saw people coming together, not talking at each other, but to each other. And through that, because at some point, in fact, if I tell you I came into Parliament, nominated in Parliament to handle Martha Karua. But as soon as I came in, we were talking to each other, not at each other. And she became my greatest ally on governance issues, on human rights issues. And I would consult and would sit. And even the late Senator, what's his name from Mukambani?
Mutula Kilonzo.
Mutula Kilonzo. Even when we are coming in, he was one of our sworn opponents. I couldn't stand him. If he appeared on TV, I'd switch it off. But at that point, we would sit together, did a lot of legislation together. In fact, if you look at the National Cohesion and Integration Act, even though it was brought by the Ministry of Justice, I am the one that Martha handed over the bill to. And I worked on the bill. Why? Because we were talking to each other. So I have seen major strides that are done in this country when we talk to each other as against talking at each other.
Thank you very much.
But the problem is most of us want a situation where they're saying, they always want a person to demonize. And
Some
I think
mudslinging must take place.
there must be some mudslinging. And unfortunately, I'd want to encourage especially my friends from central Kenya, that it's unfortunate that Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga has been demonized and over-demonized in their area. But there can always be a new script. You don't have to vote for him, but you don't also have to always see him as a demon because he was demonized to you. The same way, even to me, Uhuru Kenyatta was demonized, but I have enslaved myself from that. And I am able I am able to see the good and the bad and to say where the bad is
and to engage.
Engage meaningfully.
Honorable Millie Adhiambo, thank you very much for joining us. We'll invite you again so you can come. And now this time, I think the app will
Use
help
technology.
you to get here.
Yes. No, now I will not just use technology to manage, but to get me up at about
Get about
4 a.m.
You can come for the earlier slot.
No, earlier. No,
traffic.
earlier I will not manage.
So let's end this
I'm not an early riser.
with some words of wisdom from C.T. Muga. The day is proverb, and tell us what it means.
Well, every lizard lies on their belly. We cannot tell which has a bellyache. Well, I put it simply and said that it simply means appearances can be deceptive.